Three, two, one. We're recording. This week's episode is sponsored by Common Sense. Given the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, Ben and I are recording remotely. Please practice social distancing and wear a mask in populated public spaces. Thank you. Now on to this week's topics. Hello, Ben Bell. Welcome to this week's episode of Gears and Grades, the student-driven podcast. How are you?
Good, Jeremy. How are you doing this week?
You know what? I'm doing just fine. It's a great day. It's snowy. It's cold, but there are plenty of topics to talk about. I'm excited to jump into them. What's going on?
Yeah, definitely a cold one. For those who don't live in Southern Ontario, it's been a bad weather week here in mid-February. Had a little bit of a late winter this year, and yeah, we've been getting dumped on pretty good. I heard Toronto got a good minimum footer there
We
of
definitely
snow.
did. Yeah.
A couple places I heard as much as like 4 feet or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, London got a pretty good bit. All of Southern Ontario really delivery areas for work have all been kind of brutal lately. Yeah, it's been kind of crazy. I think I'm supposed to be. I'm in Glencoe tomorrow actually, which is like, and I think Bothwell. So I'm like an hour from here tomorrow towards
Wow.
Chatham, and they just issued a snow squall warning for that area. So that's going to be an
Goodness.
interesting commute. We'll see which. I don't know if I'm driving. I'm helping someone, so I don't know if I'm driving a transit. I know I'm the route I'm on our newest transit. Well, I guess not our newest anymore because we just bought another second newest transit. But not sure what the situation is for driver passenger tomorrow. So we'll see if I need to. I think I'm going to steal my mom's Mazda 3 actually, if anything, if I do need to use something to drive out there because my winter tires are very near the end of their life cycle, and
Oh,
the
I see.
roads, some of the deliveries on that road are to Oneida, which is the First Nations Reserve, so
Oh,
they don't
okay.
really have any paved roads. So I'm
Hmm.
assuming the plows aren't super frequent. I haven't driven out there in a storm yet, but I can't imagine the roads are going to be cleared often given how little traffic they get. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll see. I hope that you have a wonderful trip out there, and hopefully everything is safe. And take care, man.
yeah, glad the trucks at least they put snow tires on them at least.
That's
Credit
good.
to that. Beats the old rental days of driving, vehicles that weren't rear wheel drive but had fucking bald all season tires on them that
Oh
were
my
like
God.
Chinese Kumos or something, and you got stuck on 3 centimeters of snow. So if I had $1 for every Fiat 500, I used to have to push out of a parking space in the winter.
Oh. I can imagine, yeah, because they do anything to save a buck, right? With rental companies, right?
Yeah, those were bad. And actually, honestly, the worst ones were the cube trucks, like the E450s
Yeah.
and the Savannas and Expresses, because we didn't buy snow tires for the cargo vans either, and they never had any
Really?
weight in them. So like all these, rear drive cargos of 215s on the back and stuff, or 235s, and you have no weight on the rear end. So it winds up being like you hope you have a large office, so like you can have 10 employees just stand in the bed of the van and jump up and down and try and like add weight to the suspension.
Yeah.
So it's quite the miserable experience. Things I don't miss from that company.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. I mean, from what I hear, they're pretty good for drifting around in parking lots, but you didn't do that, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Theoretically, I've heard from employees who shall not be named, that they made pretty good drift vehicles. Not saying I would be involved in such things myself,
No, 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 no.
but yeah, I've heard that particularly I'm not sure as much about the vans, but I've heard particularly with the cube trucks, that from certain old employees out in my one of my previous branches a few years back. They make a good drift vehicle with some light powder underneath. You just gotta like kind of power through the pain, I've heard, of the noise from the tailgate smashing up and down, since
Yeah.
the back being exposed wood framing and pretty cheap material makes for some concerning noises while you're
Yeah.
mid drift. And the dually vehicles in general don't seem to like to slide. They're a little confused once the back end goes out, but
But yeah, of
you can
course,
manage pretty well.
but of course, remember, you didn't take part in any of this. You just heard from
No,
secondhand accounts. Yeah.
I witnessed,
You
I
witnessed,
won't,
yes.
again, I won't name names, but there's
No.
some managers that are, but if I'm naming the most reckless drivers I've ever seen, that's going to be most of the upper management in the company. It's no one that would have done what I did and cleaned cars or
Of
anything like
course, yes,
that.
because you were just
The
cleaning
managers
cars.
were
Your hands were completely clean of that. You were just
there.
watching.
There
Very
was an old
fun.
saying at some of the enterprises I worked at that the faster you drove, the faster you would get promoted, because the higher a payroll someone seemed to be on, the more reckless they seemed to drive at enterprise. That seemed to always be the consistency. if you were making, seven figures, then you were doing, seven times the speed limit. If it
Of
was
course.
six figure, yeah, it's an interesting system with that company, but yeah.
Oh, that sounds like a fun time, man. I mean, of course, none of us would do that. None of us would do that. We're very safe people. We're very responsible drivers. We would never do that. But that definitely does sound like a lot of fun. But speaking of fun, Ben, it's bullshit corner o'clock. Why don't we talk a little bit about the Mach E? It seems like you've got something in this doc you want to talk about.
Yeah, just kind of a quick thing because I know we chatted a couple episodes ago about the Mach-E and kind of
Yeah,
just gave very brief. It was more of a discussion focused on their choice to go with the Mustang name.
correct.
And that was more of the discussion than anything. And I just wanted to kind of quickly touch back on this car. I've been watching a couple of videos on it. A
Mm-hmm.
few different reviews, a few different critics have had press cars of it recently.
Yeah.
Smoking Tire did a one take with one, doing a range test, and then another, I think, Canyon video, if I remember correctly, too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I saw Jason Camisa did one of his verdicts on it. A few different journalists I've seen recently testing the Mach-E. And in general, I have to say I was a little bit, I don't want to say wrong per se about this car because I always kind of gave an asterisk to my opinions, but
Mm-hmm.
the particularly using the Mustang nameplate, from what I've heard, it actually drives. I think Doug DeMuro was the one that said this on the Smoke Tire podcast, but that it drives equal to, if not better, in his eyes than a regular Ford Mustang actually does.
Really?
That the steering, the feedback, the handling, the turn in, it rotates really easily. It's the only electric car. Camisa made a comment about this too versus the Model Y, that it's the only electric car you can drift through most corners if you rotate and use the throttle the right way. And all these
Wow.
guys are driving, keep in mind as well, a regular Mach-E, not the new upcoming Mach-E GT
The
we're going to
GT,
see
yeah.
later with extra horsepower. So this is the one that's not even tuned to be as sporty or fun, and they're already doing pretty impressive things with it. So it
Nice.
seems like it's possibly going to maybe live up to this Mustang name. It's still rear bias, it still drifts. Still don't necessarily know if I'm happy, they took the name of this two-door
Yeah.
muscle car up into a four-door electric crossover. But I must say, I'm happy it's sportier than I anticipated it would be. I really thought they were just going to milk the Mustang name, but not make it a sporty SUV.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's actually going to be performance oriented, which is a little surprising in my opinion. Um, the range seems to be doing well. It rides good. The interior I've heard is built comparable to a Tesla, but is cutting in a couple, like I think 10,000 or so under the price.
Hmm.
It seems like it's honestly one of the more compelling electric vehicle options in that sub
Hmm.
like $70,000 price range. And for me personally, and I've made comments on this before, of course, on the podcast, but it really boils down to the fact that I think the Model S looks hideous. Or sorry, my
No, you
apologies, the
like the Model
Model,
S.
yes, the Model Y, I believe, looks hideous.
Yes, the Model Y.
Um, and this I actually think looks really good. As
Oh
far
yeah.
as electric SUVs go, and Camisa was the one that mentioned it too, and a couple of journalists I've seen have critiqued it. I noticed it. I know with you when we were at the press events for it first, but that double painted roofline choice to do the character paint color of the car and arc it up and then back down towards the trunk, but then
Mm-hmm.
there's that flat black painted panel that goes straight to the back, so it kind of gives that like tricked view to make you think that the roof line is
Yeah.
lower and tapering more than it actually is. It's a
Yeah.
nice kind of like fake I forget the term for it, but a misrepresentation of the human eye,
Right.
kind of tricking people into
Illusion.
seeing something. Yes, an optical illusion. That's
Optical
the phrase I
illusion.
was
There
looking
you
for.
go.
Yeah, just in general, I'm more impressed than I thought I would be about this vehicle, and now I kind of wish I could drive one. It's unfortunate. If I ever see one in an enterprise parking lot, I'll have to try to get my job back just so I can test one of those out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I saw Doug DeMuro's a review on it. I should have seen the one take, but from what I heard from the Smoking Tire podcast, basically they spoke very well, very highly of the Mach-E. Both Doug and oh my God, Matt Farah. They both really seem to really appreciate that car. And actually, if I had to have an electric car in my fleet or in my roster of imaginary 9-car garage, I think I definitely would love to have something like that, just as a daily or something like that, because I've heard some very good things about it. I hope that when they develop it further, it becomes better and better. But from what I've heard thus far, it sounds great, and I'm super excited to see what comes of it. And yes, I would love to get my hands on one, maybe even drive it around a little bit, to get a feel for it, because I want to get comfortable with the fact that it's a Mustang nameplate on an SUV, because I'm not fully 100% sold.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely still an interesting choice to use that term. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think Farah had even said that he was considering it as a daily or like as a vehicle for his wife and him at one point, until I think it sounds now like he's actually going to be taking a Tesla Model 3, ironically, for how much
Really?
crap Matt talks about. Yeah. So I don't know
Wow.
if you're how familiar you are with Alex Roy, but Alex Roy had a Model 3 on lease and he was trying to offload the lease to someone else.
Oh,
So he
yes.
cut a really good deal with
I heard
Matt
about that.
for
Yes, I
the
did. Yeah.
lease payments and stuff. So I don't know, the way Matt talked about it, he was saying how he needed a day lease. So I don't know if the idea would be that it would be his car or that it would be his wife's car.
It's
I'm
a
not really sure how
stopgap
that's
car. The way
all.
that he explained it was that it was going to be a stopgap car until he can get something
Yeah.
better, until maybe a Defender or the Mach E. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess, and it's interesting because they still have the Delica and they do still plan on keeping that. So I guess maybe him and her will share the Delica and whatever else they own as their two
Actually,
dailies. It would make
from
sense, maybe, or
from what I heard, I think it got damaged a little bit, and they were like butthurt about it. And I understand it because that's a nice vehicle. The Delica is super
yeah, he
nice.
said it was going to be down a while for repairs, which is why he was trying to get a car right now as well,
Yeah.
because that one's going to be, obviously being a Japanese cargo van in America, I imagine getting
Yeah.
parts is not going to be the easiest thing.
Yeah.
So the
But
downside of,
it's
dailying a
super neat.
Japanese car in
Oh yeah.
LA.
Like gotta love that.
Yeah, I
So
like that van quite a bit.
so I guess you wanted to talk a little bit about this the court case because it's here on the list. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, so I closed one, at least, the case I kind of mentioned briefly in previous episodes about my accident with my Mazda last year. So I officially kind of reached a decision with the
A settlement?
prosecutors, a settlement, yeah, with that. So yeah, just overall ended in pretty good result. It was a ticket for pleading. I essentially pleaded guilty for the at fault's already predetermined by police, so there's nothing you can really do to argue that unless you go through like a huge legal thing in court, and you have
Right.
to have like, it's a good luck trying to prove that you're not at fault in situations like that. There's a few
Yeah.
where like cops just put you on one, like tag you at fault for the stupidest reason, and you can easily counter argue. But if you don't really have a good case, you're kind of stuck. So anyway, yeah, that was predetermined. But as far as the
Hmm.
ticketing concerns, instead of careless driving, which was my initial charge, it was knocked to which is the usual initial charge in Ontario, from what I've seen for rear end collisions, for those who are uninformed on our like kind of practices or whatever. But yeah, that was knocked down to something about a failure to properly yield to make left turn
Hmm.
or something, because I as I said, I think in one video I swerved to try to avoid the person and I hit the left side of them. So they basically just looked at it as I was going into the left turn lane too quick and like bumped
Hmm.
off their car, is essentially how they viewed it.
Right.
Which resulted in like it was like an $80 fine, like super insignificant, and only 2 demerit points, which is like the lowest number of
That's
points you can
pretty
get for
low.
any
Yeah.
offense. Yeah, it's 0 or 2. Those are your only two
Yeah.
options. There's no 1 point offenses, so that is like considered a very minor offense. And because it's tied to my accident, depending on if my company has insurance provider has first accident forgiveness, my apparently the ticket might not even affect my insurance on the
Really?
accident. Like it'll remove the discounts and stuff, but it won't.
Right.
I didn't actually have the discounts anyway. As of this year was the first year I was supposed to get them back, so it would theoretically mean my price would be the same as this year. Which, if that
Hmm.
ends up happening, I will be incredibly grateful,
Oh
because I
yeah.
thought I would get at least somewhat gouged, but I also don't know for sure if my company has accident forgiveness. So
Hmm.
it's also weird because it's every 5 years usually that they'll reset your forgiveness rate, and it's been exactly 5 years since my last accident. So it's like, I don't know if they how that resetting policy works, because the crash was before 5 years, but when the date where it redoes my insurance, it will have been 5 years. So I don't know how they're going to look at that, but either way, it worked out in a far more minor result than I would have obviously theoretically been charged with initially. So
I'm
happy
glad
to
to hear
say
it.
that that's a better effect. Yeah, because I don't remember if I mentioned on the podcast before, but for those who don't know, careless driving charge is the same equivalent to insurance companies, at least, as a DUI, which is the main
Oh.
problem you don't want to get them for, because
Yep.
it destroys your insurance, as you would probably expect from that.
Hmm.
So you're paying like double or triple. It's worse than like it's the equivalent of getting in like 2 accidents back to back, basically,
Yeah.
uh, for your premiums. So it destroys 2 at faults. So yeah, it destroys your rates. So I'm glad that that's not going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Now I have to like, this is that time where I have to really be, and I'm trying to be like hyper self-aware again. I mean, I feel like I'm always trying to be self-aware, but I'm really trying again, in the sense that like I can't really afford to be in another accident at this point. Like
No.
it's one of those where I'm on like a timer again until my insurance starts kicking itself back down, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. So I have to be kind of careful for the next little bit,
Yeah.
which is going to be, I mean, it is what it is. I don't even have a fast car anymore. So
No.
theoretically, this really shouldn't be a problem. The work cars top out at 105 and the Jetta can't go more than 150. So I shouldn't really have to worry that much about getting into trouble. But it's really a matter, in my opinion, a lot of it boils down to other idiots. So, and of course, also boils down to just the simple fact of, snow, bad weather in the winter, accidents are more frequent, going into a ditch, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, happy with the results overall. Um, Definitely was an interesting week for legal stuff in general, because the same week, kind of the other point what I mentioned in Bullshit Corner this week, the same week that happened, the plates on one of our work trucks actually got pulled during an MTO
Really?
inspection. Yeah. So, what would it have been, a week and a half ago or so? I was working out, helping out our Tilsonburg route for Frito, and I was in large format. So I was in one of our 5-ton trucks, the International H2s, and it's one of the Penske rental ones, one of the newer, the one that has higher mileage, but they're all newer trucks. This one at the time was at about 81,500, maybe 82,000 kilometers at that point. So pretty low mileage still, obviously. It was like a 3-year-old truck or something. And as my colleague I was driving my own car up, and I was ahead of my colleague from like where we were leaving our warehouse there. And yeah, as he came into town, I guess, officer pulled him over, and he was
Really?
like, was I speeding? He's like, what the hell? He's like, this truck's not fast. How was I? What did I
Yeah.
do wrong? And the cop says, like, so it was OPP in, I guess that area doesn't have regional police, so OPP would be the local. But yeah, they basically said they were doing an MTO based special program thing. They're randomly picking trucks, which we later found out randomly picking was picking basically every truck on the road, because there was
Really?
so little traffic at that point, that and they had so many MTO inspectors that they were pulling in literally everybody.
My God.
So yeah, my colleague got pulled in with our truck, and after they probably inspected it for, I'd say, 40 minutes before they found an issue. So they went through everything on this truck,
Huh.
and my colleague's just sitting there like freezing because it's a cold day outside
Yeah.
too, and inside the cab of the truck. He's like, God damn, like what's
Yeah.
taking this so long? And eventually, after like an hour of bullshitting around, they finally find an issue where, with the wiring, there was apparently an issue where if you had the headlights turned on and you used the left turn signal, your four ways would come on in the back of the truck. So
Oh.
both sides signal lights would come on instead of one side for some reason,
Huh.
with only with the headlights on, and only when using the left signal, not the right. And the front lights worked perfect. The front, left, and right signal worked independently. It's just the back. And so, and they pulled the plates on the truck
Oh my God. Just
for
for
that.
that
So
reason?
yeah, that was the only problem they could find. But they were
What?
like, it's considered unsafe for the road, they said, so they couldn't let us drive. We were like too, where we're like, can we not like retire this truck tonight and list it as required maintenance and like drive it back
Yeah,
to
drive it
where? And
back.
they were like, you can't put this on the road at all. Like you can't see the street again until
Oh
the
my
problem is
God.
fixed. Which was super funny, because yeah, it's such a minor issue. And
It
keep
is,
in mind
yeah.
too, this inspection was being done at 9 in the morning. When they pulled the plates, it was 10:15.
Oh no.
So it was sunny, the lights weren't on, which is how we didn't notice in the
Yeah.
pre-trip, where my colleague too was like, it's daytime and we're a small local route. We don't need the headlights anyway. Like
Yeah.
what does it matter? Worst case too, you could honestly just turn your headlights theoretically off and then put your turn signal on and then turn them
Right.
back on.
Yeah.
I actually used to do that with my Focus, where there was a brief period where I had a wiring issue with my taillight, and I actually had to do that. I'd flick my headlights off at intersections and then put my signal on and then flick them back on after I turned, because neither of my turn signals worked on the back of the car.
Huh.
And I just flicked off. So I found a way around that problem. And I had that issue with both signals. But yeah, it was funny, such a minor thing. And yeah,
Such a
apparently
minor
to them
thing.
that was enough to pull the plates on the truck. So
Yeah, that just sounds slightly legally dubious, but I don't know. I just
it's very MTO. Like
it
I feel like
is.
MTO in general has a tendency to pull people over for, really anything they can kind of pull people over for.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. That just sounds kind of sketchy. It's crazy. But Yeah, wow. What an interesting story. I would have never expected somebody to pull them over in daylight for an issue that has to do with the headlights being turned on and the turn signals. Like literally just fix the damn truck first and then, you know.
So you can see here the OPP inspecting the truck. I did to take a couple pictures here. So
Oh my gosh.
you can see actually there too, the guy's actually underneath the truck, wheeling
Yeah.
his way around, trying to look for stuff. And
Oh
again, I
my.
find this so funny too, that this was done with a truck that has 50,000, like an almost, new truck too.
Yeah, like I was just about to say that looks like a new international, am I right? Or
Yeah. So that, like I was saying that, yeah, that's the higher mileage one, but still it's like a 17 with 80,000 clicks.
that's what I
So it's
thought.
pretty
Yeah.
much brand new. Um, And yeah, it's funny that of all vehicles, and we were making jokes all the time because as I've said many times before on this podcast, our
Hmm.
sprinters are not good vehicles. So me and my colleague just kept making jokes about how crazy this would have been if they actually pulled one of the sprinters over in here, because they would have found like 15 reasons to take the plate,
Oh yeah.
excuse me, the
Yeah.
plates off those SUVs. They're not nearly, or vans, they're not nearly as well built as the internationals, or at least in the same condition. Um, and then yeah, it was quite funny because we call for our boss basically and tell him like, hey, we don't have plates anymore. Like, I don't know what you want us to do. If you want us to like get a mechanic out here,
Yeah, yeah.
like what your plan is. So they called Penske, who called their mechanic, I guess, or the contracted person for the company. Penske said they would send a guy out, but it would take like however long, where it was gonna be long enough that we were already so late into the day at this point from the initial pullover, that our
Yeah.
boss just said he'd bring out one of our new Peterbilts that I'd mentioned before,
Hmm.
that one of the ones that wasn't in service yet, and they would help switch the product over. So he came out in his car, and the other district's supervisor, so kind of like one of my other bosses essentially, Dan, came out in our truck and drove it in to help kind of like swap all the product over. But yeah, the
Wow.
came in with the new with the new truck, and we were making jokes the whole time of like, what are the odds this guy's gonna get pulled over as well on his way in. Like, is he even gonna make it into the, which is gonna be extra funny because
Yeah, yeah.
this truck has 700 kilometers on it.
Right. It's
And
like
it's
a
like, what are
brand
you
new
gonna like
truck.
what are you gonna inspect on this? And we were making jokes too. We were like, can you imagine if this goes and happens, and like, because we were thinking initially
Hmm.
that I have two supervisors, and then we were thinking initially with the supervisors too, if the truck hadn't been in use before, you're supposed to have an hours of service log. We were like,
Right.
would the supervisors know to get an hours of service log if there wasn't already one in the truck? And thank God they did and did a pre-trip inspection, because if they got pulled over and didn't have a pre-trip inspection form done, it's like a $5,000 fine or something like
Oh my
absurdly
God.
high. So they would have been screwed, and I think they can pull your plates for that too.
Oh
And
my God.
so we laughed because he got in and he came in without a cop, and we were like, oh my God, I can't believe he can get pulled over. Like,
Yeah.
how is this even possible? Like, how did he not get pulled, of all, like,
Right.
of all people or whatever? And then sure enough, I took a video on snap of this too. And he like pulls in, and we're like, oh my God, he's here, he can save us. And
There
then
he
as he
is.
pulled in, OPP, as they were pulling out, flagged
Oh.
him down and stopped him, because he's just trying to turn into this other side parking lot. We were sitting in here, and the inspection station's
Oh.
one like further lot over. And they basically thought, I don't know if he was trying to like evade the inspection station or something, but thank
Hmm.
God my boss talked him out of it, where they were like trying to pull him in for inspection. And they're like, you can't go there. And he's like, no, like, they already inspected this other truck. I'm here
Yeah.
to replace the one that you guys already pulled. And they still asked if like to inspect this truck before. And he basically debated, he's like, guys, we're 3 hours behind already because of this. And this truck, and he like opened the door of the truck, I guess, and showed the guys like, here's the driver log. You can look at the dash. The truck has set, and like when he brought it out there, it was at like 725 kilometers. And he's like,
My God.
what, like, any issue you find on this truck, Peter built something wrong. Like, it's not even like anything we could have
It's
broken
a
yet.
manufacturer problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this truck has just been like, it is, to be fair, a month and a half old, but it's just been sitting in our parking lot in the back.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't do anything.
No.
So luckily, yeah, they let us slide after this. But
My
it was an
gosh.
interesting morning for sure. We were supposed to do, I think, 5 stores that day, go through Delhi. It turned into just do these 2 stores that desperately need product and go home, because we just had taken so long
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we lost the ability basically to. get like all our stores and stuff done too. It was quite the nightmare a little bit.
Man, oh man, yeah, I would. It sounds like it. Sounds like it for sure.
A great showcase of dependability of these trucks too. Our first day back using the new trucks, we found out that in the winter the locks just freeze with ice getting jammed in
Oh,
them.
well,
So we
that's
were having
handy.
to use crappy, as you could do, barbecue lighters to try and thaw the lock enough that we could get our product out of the back of the truck to put back into the new truck. Because we bring this other truck out there in Tilsonburg, spend an hour swapping $10,000, or sorry, that day we were jamming heavy, so $29,000 of product
My goodness.
from one
Wow.
truck into the other truck. And then the next morning at like 5 a.m., we had to take all the product from the truck we swapped it to the day before and put it back into the truck from the day before. So, because you're not
Oh
allowed to just swap like
gosh.
half product, you have to swap
What a
everything at the time.
debacle.
So, yeah, it
My
was an
goodness.
interesting few days for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
sounds like it. Wow.
yeah, there was a nice, the bright side though, as I had said earlier, before I started recording, I had the chance finally to try out these, new
New
Peter,
rigs.
and I will say, the interior is pretty nice in them. I got a little like cold start video at least going with it. It's got like a lot of cabin and interior lighting, which is cool. The other ones, the internationals, don't really have that.
Mm-hmm.
More old school truck, as you can see, a lot more physical gauges, a lot more circular dials, which I kind of like.
That is nice.
Got your little weight sign with your glow plugs in the top corner.
It is pretty nice.
Starts up nice and easy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very kind of old school truck and everything, but it does have that little center screen with the tack and stuff, which is kind of interesting. Overall, I thought it was actually a pretty
I mean,
nice interior.
Peterbilt is known for being retro in the way that they produce their trucks. Even if their trucks have like newish styling, they try and incorporate classic stuff in their trucks or retro styled stuff. So, like if you look at a lot of their rigs, they look kind of retro-ish.
Yeah, I like it because especially with the internationals, you can tell the school bus heritage in the H2s,
Yep.
where everything in that truck really feels like it's trying to be like a car, like it's trying to appeal to, clientele that doesn't really necessarily know a lot about trucks. So like they want to make it all easy to use. The shifter's just a, regular shifter. You just grab the base to remove the lock, pull it down into a gear, push it back up into park.
Right.
The headlight switch is just a circular dial that you flip to on. You got your tachometer, your speedometer, your fuel gauge. Like it's all very simple, very basic layout. You got your little double din in the corner, your 3 fan speed switches.
Right.
And even the fan switches are big circular dials, kind of like regular car style. Whereas these Peterbilts, the interior switches were all like old school, kind of like the Raptors auxiliary switches.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
all old school physical toggle buttons
Toggles.
that make really loud plastic like clunk noises as you
Love
push
that.
them up into positions, which is really satisfying. Yeah, especially
Yep.
because it's a new truck, everything's still got that fresh like resistance to it.
Yes. Yes.
The shifter, the truck interestingly has no park. It just has neutral, reverse, and drive like a sport, like a DCT or something.
Huh.
And then there's a physical parking brake you pull up on the floor.
Nice.
And it's this weird little funny shaped parking brake too. It's not even a regular looking parking brake. And yeah, the shifter is just 3 buttons like R, N, and D that you press
Oh,
on the
wow.
dash, and it does. And there's a little electronic like image that shows what gear you're in, and then it also shows like readouts like transmission temperatures and stuff in like a custom little transmission cutout screen in the corner, which is kind of cool. It looks
Mhm.
like it has more advanced settings as far as towing and load capacity stuff too built into that. So I would assume if you use these for more heavier loads and stuff, that stuff would come in handy.
Right.
um One of the coolest features, I think, it has a dump mode on the air suspension, so you can actually hit a switch and it drops the back end of the truck like 14 inches, and it
Nice.
does the really loud like psh noise as it airs out the back.
Yeah.
So thought that was pretty neat. I don't really know the exact purpose of that, because like these trucks are obviously designed to perfectly sync up with loading docks as it is. But I guess if you
Mhm.
were dropping in a store that maybe doesn't have a loading dock or something, where you have to have the extended platforms that come out or whatever, something like that would be
Right.
pretty useful then, because you could just be that much closer to the ground initially.
Right.
But yeah, overall, very nice trucks on the inside. Interior seems a lot nicer. All the switch gear seems nice. It just feels like honestly a far better built truck. It doesn't feel rental spec the way that the internationals do. They even have like a nice leather to them, not like the really cheap like bus repeat use and abuse like Chevy Express leather that was in the
Yeah.
internationals and stuff. So I'm pretty was pretty happy with it overall, to be honest.
Nice.
Was
Nice.
was kind of impressed with it. I'm a little sad I won't get to drive them, if I'm being fair.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is probably actually, I finally found it here. The funniest part um of the whole week. And that is the fact that Old Dutch also got pulled over into this inspection at the same time as us, which I thought was really funny.
Oh, perfect.
That Old Dutch also got pulled. I'm very sad though. After like 20 minutes, they let them go, and I can't believe that Old Dutch actually fixes their trucks and they're just road legal. It's crazy.
Yep.
You would think, that they're just not broken.
I know. Who would have thought that? Who would have thought that? I mean, it looks like the Chevrolet Express must be superior to any international.
Apparently, that seems to be what
Apparently.
I've drawn from this.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Now, Jeremy, you as well had something you want to kind of go through this
I
week on Bullsh Report.
did.
I'd heard some vehicle maintenance stuff.
So there is some vehicle maintenance stuff. Actually, it's kind of a faulty thing going on with my grandmother's pre-knotless Lincoln MKX. So it's a 2018 Lincoln MKX. She bought it with some miles on it. It was used, obviously. I think she bought it in 2019. So it was about a year old, and she's starting to have rust on the rockers and on the doors, underneath the doors already.
Oh wow,
It
on an
is
18.
on an 18 MKX. It is pretty crazy. She suspects that the dealer sold it to her like that. And I have reason to believe that that could be possible, but there is some rust there. Now, I don't have any photos, obviously. I mean, she told me about it recently, and she said that she was quite disappointed with the quality of, these vehicles. Like, she loves the or not the Nautilus, but the MKX. She loves it. She loves it a lot. She's driven it a lot. She drives it to and from work because she still works. And yeah, she was just super disappointed with the quality of that, and she's actually trying to go back and forth with the dealer to try and get a deal to try and get that either fixed or I don't think she's looking to dump the MKX because it's still too new to her, because the last vehicle she had before that was, I believe, a 2006 Dodge Grand Caravan with worse rust on the rockers. Like, the
Well,
rust was
yeah, a
terrible.
Grand Caravan would likely have pretty bad rust, especially the '06. That
Yep.
that third gen era is you don't see many of those on the road anymore. I had this
You
conversation with someone
don't.
recently. You don't see many of the third gen Grand Caravan anymore. I feel like I'm starting to see more second gens than third gens at this
There are
point.
more second gens than there are third gens on the road because I'm pretty sure they've all rusted away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That seems to be the case. Even the earlier fourth gens are starting to get fewer and further. I'm
that's
seeing them
true.
still for sure. They're still common, but like
Yep.
quickly dwindling, quickly going down to just the newer models. Which, I mean, I can't
Yeah.
blame people. There's quite a bit of incentive right now to just switch into a newer Grand Caravan simply because the new ones are so cheap and they knock so much off MSRP that it's hard not to justify the money if you need just a reliable family vehicle. That'll go
Yeah.
for a while with newer ones at least. But yeah, the old ones definitely prone to rust.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was pretty bad. I don't know if I was correct about the year. It was the one was more rounded Dodge Grand Caravans with the plastic bumpers, the black plastic, gray. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell, but it was really old. It had some terrible rust issues. I was the one who actually pointed it out as a grandchild. I was like, "Hey, Grandma, your van, it's not looking great." And she's like, "Yeah, I know. I need to change that up." But when she was very disappointed with how there's rust on the bottom of the doors and actually through the rockers. But yeah, so for some reason, it's an issue with the vehicle. They're trying to sort it out as much as they can. But yeah, just sort of a quality kind of control issue there.
Were we discussing this generation of
Yes, we
Grand Caravan?
were, but hers was the
Yes.
base model, like
Probably
the
something more like this. The nice black door handles and
yep, black door
no,
handles,
no.
had black bumpers as well.
Oh, I don't even know if I've ever seen one of these with black bumper too. That's a real low spec.
Oh, it's the lowest of the low spec, and she bought it because, funny enough, I was born.
Oh, this is my dad's spec right here.
That's your dad's spec?
Yeah, my dad had one of these in this darker blue, exactly like this Grand Caravan SXT. This was, I think, one trim lower than this because it still had the black door handles, but had body colored
Oh,
panels on it. It was a pretty low model for sure. I think this was the one he had in blue, or did he have this one in gray? He went through so many Grand Caravans. It's a little hard to keep track of him. Yeah. His last one was beige. I remember that distinctly. Or did he blow up the silver one after the beige? No, wait, no. He had a silver one after that because
He
he went
blew one
from
up?
beige to well, he blew the transmission up in one and the engine up in the other. So
Oh, wow. I didn't know
this
that was
one,
possible.
I believe the transmission failed this generation. I could be mistaken. I think
Oh,
this one's not the engine for sure.
right.
But I think this one was the transmission. And then the other one would have had the 4 liter, I want to say. It was an early Grand Caravan, so I think it had the 4 liter. That one oil starved the head and yeah, head gasket blew and then ran on that for a minute. And then basically the whole top end of the motor needed to rebuild. So they just scrapped the van
Just
and got
scrapped it
another
because
one.
it's not worth it by then. Like right around then, it's
Yeah,
not worth
this
it.
was when he was getting there were company vans and he was putting like 95,000, like
Oh,
the one that the engine blew up on, it blew up at 191,000 kilometers, but the van was a year and a half old at like 191 or like less. It was less than 2 years.
right. So they've just mechanically totaled it then because
Yeah,
it's not
it
there's no
was.
point.
I think like someone, it's not like it went to a scrapyard or anything, but yeah, it was like one of those like the business just bought another van because they were like, yeah, he got one every 2 years anyway. Like that was the
Okay.
it's recycled so often with how much mileage was put on them.
Yeah, these vehicles were like dependable for like a short amount of time, and then you wanted nothing to do with them afterwards because yeah, that's exactly what my grandmother's look like on the inside, except it didn't have
The
leather.
round interior.
It didn't have leather though. It had cloth seats, which was my first encounter with cloth seats in a car. Oh no, my mother had a first gen CRV, so that had cloth seats as well. But my God, that was just one hell of a car, one hell of a vehicle. She ran that thing into the ground. Um, and just a lot of fond memories because she bought it primarily to ship the grandkids around because she has 3 grandkids, so she wanted to haul all of us, and then she thought a van, perfect idea, right?
That's why I think a lot of grandparents get them. That and they're easy to get in and out of, just like an SUV.
They're easy to get in and
They're
out
easy to
of,
get in and out of, you know. I was gonna say I love the same reference immediately. Good old time. Oh, what a classic episode. Yeah, this is speaking of the engine, the one with the blown engine. This nice faded shade of beige. It was great. That was a great period because my stepmother actually owned the same, had this worked for the same company at the time and had the same type of company van. So they were both Grand Caravans in this shade of beige. So there was like the driveway looked very in sync with the matching beige Dodge Grand Caravans. I'm like, this is the most, generic parent household ever to have two beige matching vans.
50 Shades of Beige, man. That's what it was. 50 Shades of Beige.
There was a brief period where I'd say how far they came because there was a nice little, crossover where it switched from the two beige vans to the Pathfinder, the Odyssey, and the MKX, which was that's a pretty nice overall driveway
That is
package,
a
if I do
nice
say
package.
so.
Yeah.
But now it's the same Pathfinder with 200,000 more kilometers and a giant sideswipe tiger claw mark on one side,
Wow.
a lower trim level Odyssey, and two Ford Escapes. So
2 Ford Escape? Oh, right. Because right.
each of my subs is up one. So yeah, it's
Yes.
there's more volume, but not as much luxury in the driveway in my
That's
opinion.
true. Yes.
And the
I agree.
Pathfinder's wear and tear has really given it a bit of a clapdo look now.
Really?
So yeah, the paint job really would help a lot, but it's just one of those, again, speaking of mechanically totaling, doesn't make any physical sense to repaint a vehicle that already isn't worth much of anything.
Is he thinking of possibly getting rid of it soon?
No, he's already decided the resale is kind of non-existent anyway. He's just going to drive it until something super expensive explodes, and then he's going to get rid of it and buy
Get rid
something
of it and
else. So he's just going to push it essentially into the ground. This is his plan.
really? Oh man.
No real point, and he doesn't think he can really get anyone that'll want to buy it with the mileage. So.
No, no, you wouldn't. Like even I wouldn't buy it if it was cheap enough. I still don't think I'd buy one, but yeah, I don't know. Just as a car guy, I don't think I would do that. I don't think I could do that to a car unless it was like a complete shit box, right? Like that's just something interesting about car people. I don't know about you. I mean, you seem to like to do that with the Jetta, but run it into the ground almost. But you do treat it with respect.
Yeah, I mean, and my dad's the same way. Like he'll still fix necessary parts. It's just you have to know when to get out on certain
That's
cars, and I
true.
think that's a fair point to take. I think with the Jetta, for me especially, I've just hit a point of no return where I already know I went past where I should have gotten out, so I've just accepted my fate,
Yeah.
and I just live with Stockholm syndrome now and just deal with my consequences.
Now, I mean, I know at least you might have something new on the horizon. You might have that Passat come by.
Yeah,
Have
if
you made
not
any
that, then
decisions, or are you still
ST.
waffling there?
Still pretty set on the VW, I think, at this point. I don't want to ever eliminate the ST as an option. And, I was looking at them initially when I was trying to make, and I think they came up in our possible new next car episode.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I see a Mazda 6 on the road, especially the earlier ones with the signature lighting package,
Yeah.
where they light the whole grill assembly up,
Yep.
I really have that moment again where I'm like, oh, owning a Mazda 6 would be so nice.
That would be so
And
nice. Yeah.
the Passat would have more potential for aftermarket and has more space, but the Mazda is a newer car inherently, and
Yep.
Mazdas just always have that steering dynamic thing that VW can't really match, which is the big thing that would tempt me to get a 6 over a turbocharged Passat. At the end of the day, I think I would still lean to the VW. It's just one of those. If I see a deal on a 6, I don't know if I'd say no to one still.
Right. Right. I mean, yeah. Yeah. I would say go for the deal, but also that Passat is like sorted. So,
Mhm.
like, that's why I would go towards the Passat. And plus, it's nice
Yeah,
looking. It's nice looking.
it is, yeah. And it's I think we discussed it already before when I made the decision, but yeah, the aftermarket potential with the engine and, as
Oh
you say, the
yeah.
sorted, the lower mileage, all the new parts.
Yep.
As I've said, the biggest downside really is it's too sorted almost in the way that because it has new shocks and struts, I can't put
You
it
can't
on
do
air and
anything to it.
justify it. Yeah, if I put it on air, I have brand new suspension to like throw away. Where I'm like, well, if it had blown suspension, that would might justify. I was made the joke with Jetta, I would just slam it on air eventually
Just
because the
slam it on
shocks are
air.
so bad that I would just give up and be like, oh, okay, let's just buy Raceland. I really wanted to try because I don't know if Raceland coilovers, right? The
I
company that has
believe so. Yes.
infamously
I believe I'm
crappy,
familiar. Yeah.
like, yeah, cheap, like the cheap
The
coilover to
cheap
buy.
kind of
That's
coilovers. Yep.
always a piece of, yeah. So they make an air suspension kit. I don't know if you're aware of
You're
now. So
fucking
you
kidding
can,
me.
yeah, my friend actually has it on his Mark IV Golf, and it is a air kit for like $1,000.
No
Um,
way.
dirt cheap. Yeah, it's like I
Is
think
it garbage though?
1,500 all in for a kit. Oh, now credit to my friend, his has had no issues for almost 2 years now. Really, he's had a
Really?
few minor air leaks, and he had to adjust the sensors I think once.
Hmm.
Um, but a lot of the air leaks were his own doing, or just using the wrong lines, or the setup being not the most optimized. Um, in general, he has had pretty good luck. It really was just like one sensor issue. He's never had a compressor failure, nothing like that. However, I've heard a lot of stories of people that have had issues with them.
Hmm.
So I definitely don't want to like go out there on record. I'm not saying on record at all that these are reliable by any means,
Yeah.
but they're an option if you're trying to just do cheap coilovers. And if it's you're one of those like YouTubers or something where you're building a car for a cheap
A
budget
cheap
project and
build.
you're
Yeah.
like, screw it, like you're buying, if you're gonna buy $1,000 Civic and take it to car shows for one season and then just get rid of it the next fall, I don't really see the problem in buying just cheap bags, because if you're just doing it for a season anyway, so you're like,
Yeah.
when I've talked before, about putting bags on the Speed 3, I wouldn't be putting cheap bags on that car because I don't plan on selling it, so there's no reason to cheap out. But in the case of, yeah, if you're doing something more on a budget, then it's not really a reason
Yeah. I mean,
not to go for the budget option.
you mentioned the $1,000 Civic, and the first thing that comes to mind, or the first YouTuber that comes to mind, is Robbie Ferrari. I cannot pronounce it for the life of me, but he's a Canadian YouTuber. He bought a Civic. He did the exact same thing you're thinking. He did Duraflex all over the place. So there's like a Duraflex wide body kit. He wrapped it so it's yellow. It's got the giant, massive freaking wing. eBay turbo kit. Amazing. Just shout out to him. He doesn't need the shout out, but still, uh, just absolutely hilarious. He did that. He did the exact build. He started off by doing a Wish build, like he bought all the parts on Wish and stuff like that, and then he
Oh, okay.
migrated over to eBay, and then he fell in love with the car, as one normally does. After a while, you fall in love with it, and then he started to unwish the car and turn it into something special. And now it's got like a blast pipe coming out of the hood. It's hilarious. That thing's a blast.
Yeah, it's good to always nice when people fall in love with the beater. There's something special about the beater builds too, that
Yeah,
they can get a
yeah.
special place to your heart.
Like I think if I were to do a beater build, I'd probably do the cheap air suspension first, and then if I fell in love with it, I would then probably remove the suspension kit and try and get something that's a little better, right? Like
Mhm.
that's usually how you start off. I mean, I'm sure in a different timeline, maybe if that air suspension kit existed when you had the Speed, would you have done it to the Speed?
None of the budget kit. No, again, for the same reason. I too firmly believe that if I'm keeping it long term, I should just pay the extra for the better
Pay the
parts. I
extra.
do that with
Yeah.
most cars. So yeah, I don't see the issue with it. I think about it more for my friends that I know that tend to buy 8, 10 cars per year where they switch through vehicles constantly.
They
That
don't
those are
hold
really
on to
perfect
those 10
for.
cars, do they?
Yeah, because then to me, I never understand why people, unless your parts are transferable to the next car you're buying,
Right.
I don't really see why you spend extra money on all of these. Like the amount of people I know that spend all this money at the ass to do engine swaps and things like that just to sell the car for the price they bought it at before paying for all the engine components.
Yeah.
Um, and they just end up eating all this extra cash, which to a certain extent is just par for the course of buying cars. But I think there's ways to mitigate your expenses a little bit,
Yeah.
and that's one of those where it's like not a bad way to save money if you're just
Yeah.
planning on doing a one season car kind of thing.
One season car, and then you keep all the stock parts. Sorry about that. And then you sell the vehicle. You put it all back to stock because some people do that. They keep the
Yeah, I mean
stock parts and
even
then yeah.
yeah, even worst case, if you didn't have the parts left, you had to sell the aftermarket ones on the cheap. You're not
Yeah.
losing as much cash as trying to resell the more expensive air system that's now worth 50%. So you've lost 2 grand or over whatever period of time and things like that. So
Yeah, because modified cars don't sell well. They just don't.
yeah, your parts never really add value to a car. It's
Nope.
fairly rare unless it's like an OEM spec, like Matt Farah's Aston manual swap that Aston Martin themselves did, or when how
Yes.
Ferrari pays those kits to convert 430s to gated manuals, things like that, or Mercy conversions from E-gear to stick. Like you can make money on things like that, but you're speaking at that point about $50,000 upgrades to cars. Any sort of doing exhausts and doing, if anything, they break even on value, but they never add to a
No.
car, which
They
is
never add
always the
value
funny thing.
unless you're doing the only exception is like six digit muscle car retro, what do they call it? God, they
Or like
retrofit new
retro resto
resto
stuff.
mod. There we go, resto mod, where
Yeah.
they do the resto mods. I was on Rob Pitt's YouTube channel. He's from VinWiki, or he was featured on VinWiki a couple times. Rabbit. He was featured. He was talking about a resto mod Pontiac Firebird, and they did a bunch of stuff to it. It has like 550 horsepower, or something like that, with
Hmm.
modern stuff inside. But they keep some of the old retro stuff, but they've got like, I think it's got like Apple CarPlay, and you can also tune it while you're inside as well, which is crazy. You can tune it from like the system, the head unit. So it's super cool.
It's pretty
Um,
cool.
but it's stuff like that that adds values to classic cars, right? Um, I don't know. It depends on how far you go. I mean, this car was pretty original with um, its wheel choice. It was just like a bigger forged version of the Fire Chicken wheels, if you can imagine the
Yeah.
Firebird wheels. Yeah, yeah, the oversized ones. But anyways, we've we've gone past the topic at hand. But there you go.
Yeah. I guess from there we can move on to one of our kind of newer our newer segments, I guess, through here for just kind of a brief one that we were adding in to kind of follow up bullshit corner, which is just new spottings. No, this is going to be kind of a smaller one that we'll just touch on. Some weeks
Mm-hmm.
we will, some weeks we probably won't. But just a quick mention of new cars we've been seeing on the road. Also figured within here we could throw in anything crazy we see.
Yep.
You see a car that's super rare. You don't usually see some ridiculous, some dude do a burnout in an intersection in a manual Previa, whatever. Ridiculous car stuff we have had from recent. We can kind of just drop into here. So things we spotted. So I guess would you like to start off here, Jeremy? With it
Sure.
looks like you've
Why
got
not?
your first car mentioned is the same one I've been seeing
Yeah,
on
well,
the.
actually, the first two are actually the same vehicles we've
Ooh,
talked to,
yeah.
or talked about and seen. So, we may as well jump right into it. So, of course, I was on my way to the mall because I had to get my glasses fixed, and I spotted an F-150, the brand new F-150, the redesign. Ben, I don't know if you're pulling up pictures. We'll see. It was nice. I saw it rolling. Of course, I also passed by Thorncrest Ford. They have a huge lineup of F-150s on display. So, of course, you get to see all the new F-150s on display from low spec to high spec. Um, all around, beautiful looking truck. I like it. I'm a huge fan. The rear end reminds me, I think I've said this before, the taillights remind me of the 2015, or no, sorry, 2014, 2013 F-150 taillights. Um, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of those earlier 2010. There we go. Sorry, 2010 model F-150s. But God,
Yeah, I could see that with the taillights, particularly the facelifted of the tens, the later FX4s and things like
yeah,
that. But
yeah,
this blue sport model here brings quite a bit of memories back to that late 13, the early EcoBoost F-150s and things like that.
yeah. Even the ones with the 5.4s, because they came with the 5.4, the terrible ones that you definitely don't want.
Yeah,
Um,
the good old snap a spark plug in the head of the engine,
and
5.4.
you're fucked.
Classic
Yes.
motor. Classic Triton. Yeah.
Classic Triton. So what were your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, kind of echoing a lot of same stuff as you. I think I don't know if we'd ever spoken about it here, but I was a little mixed on these trucks when they first started coming out. I couldn't tell, I didn't dislike them at all, but I couldn't tell if I liked them more or less than the current body style.
Yeah.
I was a little mixed on the 15 when they first came out, particularly because I was always a really big fan of the styling, at least of the later year previous generations.
Yep.
Now it doesn't mean I necessarily think they're better trucks. I'm just saying, purely from a styling standpoint, I prefer the older models. And then as we switched to the 15s, I was a little mixed. And then the 18 facelift, and I was even more mixed, where I couldn't even
Yeah.
tell initially if I thought the 18s looked better. But I had kind of the same effect with the 18s, where when I started seeing them on the road, I realized I think I did like them better than the 15 styling overall. And
Yeah.
then I was never a big fan, I will say, of the F-150 being stamped into the tailgate. I feel like it's a bit of a fake heritage grab a little to do it with all
They're
these companies, because
falling into the ram trap.
yeah, and I give them credit for stamping, at least same thing with Chevrolet now with their new trucks. I
Yep.
credit them for stamping and not doing the ram embroidered logo thing where it actually stamps out of the truck and not
Mm-hmm.
into the bed. I prefer it to be indented into the truck at least. Um, but yeah, just the styling use. I will say Ford's doing it the best of everyone in my opinion with how they integrate it, but I still don't love the use in general. It just feels like fake. Same thing with the bar taillights everyone's doing now. It feels a little bit like bandwagony a little once
It
more than
does
one
seem a
company
little
does it.
bandwagony now. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, as I was saying, though, with the 18s, didn't initially like them, grew on me, and I think I'm having the same effect with these, where I do think the more I see them on the road that they do actually look better than the previous generation. Like a lot of F-150s, the grills change drastically based on the model you're
They
looking at, so
do.
I think that makes a big effect.
It does.
Um,
Like I like that
something
grill.
like yeah, something like this limited grill I think doesn't look too bad.
Yeah.
But I've never been a big fan of Ford base model grills. Like this grill, I don't think looks great, and that's not even on a super low trim truck. I really like their sport grills
I
though,
like
things
that.
more
Yeah.
like this grill even I think was kind of a
Nice.
cool
Yeah.
looking one. If there's another better example, but yeah, something kind of along like these lines. I think these are really good looking front end. The twin bar with the black paint match accents and things like that. I think this is probably one of the best
Yeah.
looks as far as grill assembly. I actually saw one in red with a spec similar to that recently, just this week, and I think it looked really sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was
Yeah.
quite a fan of it actually, and
I saw limited. That was the one that I saw.
I've seen a few different. I saw one King Ranch actually. I saw one or two Lariats, and then I've seen a few FX4s and a few sports. I think sports are actually probably the ones I've seen the most of. Yeah,
Yeah,
another
that
good
would make a
looking
lot
one
of
here. It's just
sense.
a very clean look with the all black and white, like something like this,
The
It's
sport
not too
ones are
flashy.
yeah. Yeah, the sport ones are real popular in Toronto, as well as the limiteds. Like you can easily catch someone in a limited or a sport. But
Yeah, I find Rams are similar in that sense too, where it seems a lot of their clientele like to buy the sports because it's that like pavement princess truck spec, where
yep.
the truck looks cool without looking super like without costing a lot of money. It's the way to make like a base model truck essentially look half decent.
Yeah,
Because the sport models usually, unless you option them up, don't have a lot for features.
that's
It's
true.
more of an appearance kit than anything. A lot of stuff you can get them equipped pretty well, but it's all
Yeah,
optional stuff you're adding on at the tail end. So
yeah. Well, speaking of other vehicles that we spotted on the road, the new Defender. Now, when I first saw it, I wasn't 100% sure. But when I saw it in pictures, obviously, I wasn't 100% sure on my opinion, right? Because as I've mentioned before on this podcast, you really need to see something in person before you can make a proper judgment on something. And so there's somebody in my neighborhood, because our neighborhood's kind of hip, has a green Defender, much like Doug's. I think
ooh,
Doug's is green. It's a
nice.
4-door as well. It is very nice. I am a fan. I am a big fan of it. It looks super sleek. I've actually on my way to Sherway Gardens again. dropping names here and locations. On my way to Sherway Gardens, of course, I've seen about 2 on the way. I think I've seen, yeah, because they only have the 4-door models, so they don't have the 2 doors. But I've seen the 4 doors. They're nice. They're nice. I like them. Would like to drive one. I've sat in one. We both sat in one actually at the
Yes,
auto
it's true
show.
actually.
We both sat in one. So yeah, I guess we can say that we actually like them. But yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, fairly similar. I was pretty positive. I was also a little concerned when they first started showing the pictures.
Yeah.
I thought the weird, like storage things on the top were a little unusual. I did
Hmm.
like the square look to it and the heritage look to it, but I'm like, I don't know if I think this is a great looking vehicle per se or anything. But yeah, the more I've seen these in person too, Doug, I think, as well mentioned this a lot, but they look far smaller in pictures than
They
they are in
do.
real life. Like
Yeah.
in this picture to me, I am seeing a two-door Jeep Wrangler,
Hmm.
almost like narrower than that and pretty short. Like to me, that looks like the length of maybe an Escape, maybe something a little bit longer, and like
Yeah.
the width of an old Jeep, like a 90s Jeep or something, or an early
Hmm.
2000s one. But no, these things, like seeing these in person, this is the size of like, a BMW X5, a Jeep Wrangler itself. Like, and there's just something about, I think it's the fender flares maybe, but they look very narrow in pictures and they're just far wider and far taller than they look in photographs in person.
Hmm. I'd agree with you on that. And also, the common complaint with the older Defenders is that you couldn't have, what was it, like a left arm or a right arm, whatever arm that's right by the
Oh
window.
yes,
You
on
couldn't
the
have
windows
that
there.
arm. It would be best if you could chop it off, so you could fit. This vehicle, yeah, you could definitely have both your arms and be comfortable. Um,
Still got the
that
bench seat option, which is incredible.
I love that actually. I'm glad that they integrated that into this Defender. Very nice. I love it.
Yeah, I was quite pleased seeing these on the roads. They're a lot more interesting than I thought they would be, and I'm seeing a lot of them here in London for the compared to like another Land Rover based, any other Land Rover based product really.
I
And I don't
Yeah.
really see a lot of any Land Rover based stuff around this area. Either direction, out towards Bayfield, out towards any of the counties I go to either. But London being the biggest populated city I'm in somewhat often,
Hmm.
I don't really see a lot of Land Rover. If I do, it's usually the crappier like Discoveries and things like that,
Yeah.
or just Evokes. But I'm seeing quite a few of these on the road, so it's cool to see these are populating a little bit. These are picking up traction. They seem to be well liked by the community, other than old Defender people, which will continue to say how they wanted what was basically a 20-year-old Jeep as their
Yeah.
new vehicle option. But I'll let Doug continue to make fun of those clientele because he already does quite a
He
thorough
does
job at
quite
it
a bit.
himself.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm happy with it. Although I'd love to see a head to head of the Bronco and the Defender. From what I've heard, the Defender is really freaking good off road. Like Doug DeMuro has been like
Hmm.
praising this thing to the moon. He's been so happy with it. That I don't know there. I think for the price, the Defender will offer better things than the Bronco because I haven't heard anything about cameras and stuff like that because I from what I've heard the Defender has a lot of cameras underneath the vehicle and around the vehicle. I don't know if the Bronco will have the same thing. I doubt it because it's
Most, I imagine it'll have at least 360 because the Raptors already do. But yeah, I
oh
don't know how
right.
many cameras they will really have. I would think nine minimum, but we'll see how many they. I would imagine it's not going to be like doing the automatic water fording depth gauge and stuff like the Land
Yeah.
Rover does. Don't think it'll have that kind of feature in
No.
it for sure.
That's one
A little bit
quirk you
lower
won't
budget car.
find in the Ford Bronco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, lastly, I guess the other vehicle I'd seen recently is the new T-Rex. Fine, saw the first one of those on the road too.
Really?
Unfortunately, didn't get to hear it start or drive or anything. Although I guess it just sounds like a Hellcat, so I kind of can already predict what the result's going to be.
Mhm.
But yeah, I finally got to see one on the road. Ironically, as we talk about it as well, parked beside a new F-150, so a nice
Really?
little side by side. I got a picture of it, but
That is amazing.
it's unfortunate the angle I got as I was taking the photo a little bit quickly last minute, but I wish I had a longer time simply for the fact of computer's being very slow to respond here. But
Yeah.
the track width of this vehicle, I wish I could capture better in pictures, is absurdly wide, even compared to I think a Raptor. This thing, like it is the parking space. Like
It
it's that
is.
classic
Yeah.
dually truck look where I looked at it when it was parked, and it is like sitting on the line on basically both sides. He really does not have much wiggle room for space. And just in general, it's quite a big truck. You can see in this picture how much higher the hood line is,
Yeah.
the roof line than the F-150. It's definitely quite the. I like this one too, as you can see, covered in some mud up on the side, so it's been used a little bit
Oh
already,
yeah.
which is cool. It also has, you can see a little in the picture, but the ram bar on the back
Yep.
as well, which is nice. They optioned out the ram bar and the black hood and the graphics. So they did a lot of the cool packages and stuff with it. Overall, pretty cool truck. I like seeing the first one of these in person. I still appreciate that Dodge is doing this, completing their collection of ridiculous, putting 700 horsepower in literally all their product line decision they've been
Yeah.
making lately.
Yeah. That is yeah, wow, that is a big truck. Like, I'm not surprised. I knew it was going to be big, but like looking at that Ford, like side by side, that Ford is tiny.
Yeah, it makes like a regular F-150 look, and that's the newest one, the biggest one,
The biggest
and
one,
it
yeah.
still makes it look quite small. Short of getting a Raptor, that would be a little bit higher, but from what I've
Yeah.
seen in pictures of them side by side, it even dwarfs the Raptors quite a bit from stock height to
Yep,
stock height. So
that's true.
they're which is probably why the new ones are coming with optional 37s now, because they got to compete. They got to be the biggest truck out there. Everyone's gonna have the largest truck. So
Yeah, but you know what they say about people with big trucks?
yeah, exactly. Big hearts.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll try and pretend to say something nice here. So as to not.
Yes. We're such a PG channel here. Can't say anything dirty. Anyways, moving right along, I guess we may as well start talking about some new cars. There's a lot
Yeah,
going
some
on.
new
Actually,
news
no,
in
it's
the
a pretty
industry.
quiet week, isn't it? Because
Um,
I don't
yeah,
know.
not too much big stuff. A couple new vehicles, as we were talking about before. One a new trim, the other two new models. One with a major refresh, and technically one all new, I guess. And then some kind of bigger news, but the with Jaguar there that we'll get into later. But
It is pretty big, yeah.
yeah, I guess we'll start off though by mentioning the new Chevrolet Bolt and Bolt EUV.
Yes. This is an interesting redesign. I love the redesign, first of all, because I wasn't a huge fan of the older bolts. I have an aunt.
Interesting.
I have an aunt who has the older bolt. It's nice. It drives nice. It's nice and quiet. I don't know. I just thought it was very funky. This one kind of satisfies the new sort of way that cars are designed, where if you can tell, it's got the running lights on the top, and then below it it's got the big projectors, right? So I don't know how I feel about that trend, but I definitely think that this one is better designed, just for the fact that it's more simplistic. It satisfies every need with an EV car, at least, or my personal needs with an EV car. Just plain simple, not too complex. What about you, Ben?
It's interesting to say that you actually really prefer the redesign, because I've heard that a lot from people, and I actually think that the old one looked better, personally. Um,
Really?
Now that being said, I don't really think either look particularly good, but
That's true.
I think the redesign one here, I don't like this trend EVs are going to blocking off or getting rid of the front grills or front cutouts. So
Hmm.
the kind of plasticky centerpiece look to me, large Chevy front chin at the top, make it look kind of awkward to me. The headlight design I don't mind. I like the kind of boomerang shape. Um, but yeah, as I had said a second ago, I don't think the Bolt was ever that great looking of a car, so I don't think
I
it's
kind of agree with
offensive
you on that one.
styling
Yeah.
changes or anything. I don't think that that I would have bought this before, but now with the new styling, I wouldn't. Like, it's not like they've gotten drastically worse by any stretch. It's a
I
bit more the same, definitely more of a modernized look. People do seem
Yeah.
in general think it's an improvement, so I'll give them credit, I guess, for that. I do think the interior seems to be a nice improvement. The old one had a very weird,
It
awkward, kind
was
of cheap
so
looking
weird.
interior.
It was so cheap. It has a cheap feeling. Regular car reviews, I believe, did do a review on it, and I have to agree with them. Everything is cheap. Everything feels weird. It just feels like you're in a hospital waiting room. I've been in one recently, so I should know. It just feels so gross and plastic. And this, I'm hoping, has a better feel, because you pay so much for that car. That interior, that cheap interior, is just unacceptable. And so this car, because I remember going for a ride one because my aunt has one. Um, it actually feels like a kind of a golf cart, kind of a go kart kind of feel. So I don't know. I guess it's nice. It's never been a handsome looking car. I disagree with you on the grill thing. I think I'm actually okay with that little grill insert. I mean, I'm okay with it because it shows kind of a new approach to cars. I know that taking away the grill is kind of a weird thing to do, so at least they try and keep some semblance of a grill, right? So
Yeah, there's no perfect way to do it. Unfortunately, I think the
no,
best way is honestly just the black look where you just close the whole grill but paint it black so you can't tell that it's closed.
fair
Um,
enough. Fair
and it
enough.
really is like a fake thing, so I shouldn't like it, but my brain just can't. It's like when Tesla first went to the grillless look, I thought it looked so weird.
It did look weird, yeah.
I just can't, my brain hasn't fully recalibrated to it yet. And when they do this weird crystallized like layering over itself thing, it just doesn't really click for me, but I think otherwise it's definitely some styling improvements.
Yeah,
Um, it's
yeah,
nice to see just in general this vehicle gets the big, I guess biggest news I would argue. Starting price is now $5,000 cheaper,
that's
which is really
good.
big.
That's big. Yeah.
That gives it a much better competition because before it was only $1,000 under the Model 3. And I think
So
it was just
stupid.
everyone could agree it was a far worse car than the
It
3.
was so
Um,
bad, so bad. I still think
yeah,
the original's bad.
yeah, it's slow, it's not that fun, it's a bit pondering from what I've heard on the
Yeah.
road.
Yep.
The space isn't inherently any better really than Tesla's, the ergonomics aren't any better than Tesla's, the
Hmm.
interiors, the build quality is not really any better, the interior is arguably worse. It was slower, the range wasn't as good. So in general it just didn't really click.
Nope.
I feel like as a car it kind of just came out in a non-competitive market. But as Mercer kind of mentions here, courtesy of them for some of these stock images in the article, but yeah, they're cutting the price down to 31,995 in the States, which is cheaper than a Nissan Leaf by almost a thousand
Competitive
dollars,
pricing.
cheaper by almost 3,000 to the Hyundai Ioniq Electric, which is only rated 170 miles. The Kia Niro EV, which I've heard good things about, $40,000. It's 9,000 cheaper than that, which comes close to it in range, but again, it's 9 grand. And the least expensive Model 3 is 38. So yeah,
Hmm.
you're coming in by 6,000 cheaper on that too. So it's a great value. I think to my knowledge, it's one of the cheapest EVs in the market at this point, other than some super small ones. I don't know where the Golf EV sits, but I can't imagine it's at that price either. So seems
No.
like a really good overall value. Um,
Yeah, from what I hear, just from any kind of Euro car, their pricing is usually expected to be around like $5,000 to $10,000 more expensive than any American offering. So they're usually more expensive.
Yeah, they're coming in definitely at a good competitive number, and
Yeah.
they're also offering to do free household charger installations.
Oh,
So for
good.
your level 2 upgraded chargers, there's no $2,000 or $5,000 penalty to have a shop come and install that stuff for you. I think the Volts it was like 800 to install them or something.
Yep.
So that's now a fee people don't have to worry about dealing with either for fast charging. So yeah, overall, I think pretty good improvements on the vehicle. And along with it, probably also interestingly, I don't know if anyone expected it, was the addition of the Bolt EUV or whatever coming out at the same
Yeah,
time.
EUV. My God. Now this is, I'm gonna say it's a sharper looking, kind of a sharper looking vehicle from the front at least, because it doesn't have that funky headlight. Actually, no, I don't know. When I first
It's
saw it,
interesting. The headlight doesn't taper the same way. It's just a flat design.
yeah,
Um, I
but
think somehow the front end wears the grill better, but I think I
it
like the way it's
does.
less funny enough compared to the other one. So I
Fair enough. I mean, what are your thoughts on the design just as a whole for this vehicle?
it's funny in the pictures they talk about how much longer it is and how much bigger. I can't really honestly see the
I don't
size
see it
increase
either. Yeah.
much. I see it a little in the height. It looks a little taller.
Yep.
And I think I can see that it's like mildly longer, but I really feel like I just see body height. I don't even know if I see height as much as if I cut back here, if I'm just seeing the fact that, okay, no, these are both painted black on the bottom. I was going to say, is one just have more body cladding, but they have about the same.
About the
Um,
same. They're trying to make this
but
one look like an SUV for sure. I can see it
yeah, I can see it like when they look at trunk pictures that it is a little bit larger,
noticeably
but
bigger. Yeah.
yeah, it definitely isn't the same size, but it's funny in
No.
pictures. Yeah, I just don't see the size increase very much.
Yeah, no, that was
Um,
my thing because when I looked at it, I thought, What are they going for here with this? Like, what is General Motors doing? Are they trying to bamboozle us with something that's about the same size?" Like, I genuinely thought it was running on the same sort of running gear because the length, I couldn't see the difference. I want to see a side by side picture so I can see the difference. If it's not that much, then I don't know. I'm wondering. I'm wondering if, or I'm curious if it's as big as the Ford Edge or the Echo Sport, as the Ford
mhm.
wants it pronounced.
Yeah,
Um,
I assume it's going to be close to like Echo Sport size. It seems like it's going to be very small in
yeah,
pictures. Um, only adds 90 pounds of weight too, so it's got to be roughly in the same, region as far as
as the Echo
size and
Sport.
competition, everything. So
Yeah,
I'm thinking the interior looks about the same as the Bolt as well. And the starting price is only interestingly $2,000 more, so it's still one of the cheapest um
right.
vehicles. So I guess they really are just trying to add a second option for people if you want a Bolt with slightly more space. It's almost a little weird to me with how close as the prices are, and like the chassis are almost the same size without being the
Yeah,
same.
yeah,
It's a little unusual, if anything, to me that they're choosing to make both of these because they seem like they're almost the same car as it is anyway.
yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. The
Kind of
my like
interesting
the range is
indeed.
the same, the starting price is about the same, the size isn't that far off. It seems like old school GM of like cannibalizing themselves with their own car.
Yeah, they're up to their old tricks again. I mean, just look at GMC Sierra, God, Chevrolet not Suburban, Silverado. Just look at all that. Just look at that. They're about the same thing. Just yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll be curious to see when they come out how it stacks up against EV competition. It seems like it has potential to maybe be up in the higher conversation for, if you have a very aggressively fixed starting price. But
Yeah.
it definitely continues, I feel like, to not hit the strides of like a Tesla or anything like that. I don't think it's in any way competing to that level yet still.
Right, right. Okay, all right, and moving on to something that I hear is something very close to your heart. You seem to like Porsche, but here we go. Porsche 992. They've now got the 992 Gen 911 GT3. It is just announced. This is new news for today, which is the 16th of February. So Ben, would you like to start things off?
Yeah, without further ado, is yeah, Jeremy said the new GT3. So this car's been leaked for I feel like over a year at this point. There's been
Oh
rumors
yeah,
for a long time, teasers by Porsche. And everyone kind of already knew what this car looked like. The camo it's been wearing the last few months hasn't been very discreet either. GT3s in general already look pretty close to stock, just wider fenders and a wing. And that's essentially what they've done here. Pretty much carries over a lot of the same stuff. Still a 4 liter. It's still roughly the same power, 2 more horsepower, 25 more pound-feet of torque. Um, I do appreciate the engine still 9,000 RPM redline. Emissions controls hasn't dropped that at all down. Adding 25 torque without removing the redline, like dropping it any lower two is really nice. There's the brief period, where some of the GT cars, the red lines went down to 8. So I like that we're back up to the moon of 9, 10,000 RPM, really letting these engines scream because the louder
yeah,
these things rev, the better. Um, and just overall a really sharp looking car. I still think they're a little awkward looking in general, these new 992, like GT series, at least with these wings. I like that they didn't do the full as aggressive as it seemed like the concepts had reverse wings. Maybe that was an RS thing,
right,
but
right.
it does still have the top mounted wing, which I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't
I feel
know.
like it's a little boy racer.
It is a little
Um,
bit boy racer there. Yeah, I definitely see it.
So I don't know. I have mixed kind of feelings about this car, but I really like that new taillight. As I just earlier complained about the bar taillights on cars, I actually think this specific one looks good.
It does. I
Um,
mean, it's the signature look for Porsche as of right now, and I think it definitely suits the car. I'm just gonna hop off one quick sec. Ben, keep going.
Alrighty, sounds good. Yeah, so I definitely think that it's overall kind of a car that's still looks good, still is going to be competitive. I mean, the GT class exists for such like a perpetual business state at this point. People usually buy a GT3 GT car, sit on it, especially the 3 series, they'll sit on them, drive them. You can basically sell them for what you paid for them. And then you just step right into another GT3. That's been pretty common practice. A lot of people at 99 what would it be, 991s. When the dot two came out, stepped straight from the dot one to the dot two, particularly adding the manual option instead of just PDK for the regular GT3s. That was a big deal. So I think a lot of people ordered manuals. The take rate, I'm curious with this one because I've heard stories already that with these dot twos, the take rate for the manuals is so high because it was not an option on the point one that there's rumors that there's possibilities, these, especially the RSs, but even the regular 991.2 GT3s, the PDK models will actually hold some decent resale because there's going to be so few of them there because the market just got washed out by the stick. So the fact that this one's confirmed, if I'm not mistaken as well, to still have a row your own gear option, having that manual transmission, I think I'm curious to see what the take rate and the split is on this new one, if it's going to send the ratio any further one direction or the other. I'll have to scroll through here to see if you guys follow along live with me to confirm whether or not this company is going to have, yes, a proper 6-speed manual is available too. I thought that had been confirmed officially. So yeah, we've got the 6-speed still. We've got the 7-speed PDK. Having both options, always nice. I like to see both. I think any car really should have both offered if they can. Obviously, we've talked about on this podcast before, manuals have been getting progressively more rare. So I'm happy to see that it's still a continuing thing. Really impressive to see this thing put down a 6-minute 59 Nürburgring time. Slower, obviously, than the GT2 RS, but 17 seconds quicker than the 991.2 GT3, excuse me, and only 2 seconds slower than the 918 Spider. So great example of just showing how far we've come in GT cars in that, less than 10 years. A $200,000 Porsche is now running the times of a north of $1 million Porsche used to run. So pretty cool to see. Pretty happy to see kind of the continued improvements this car's made.
Yeah, like it's fantastic. I love that. It's just a shame that most of the buyers, as Doug DeMuro jokes, only really care about the stitching in their cars.
Yeah, it's there is the deviated stitching run list Porsche people, and hopefully there won't be they won't be the only demographic purchasing this car. Hopefully we do still, have the enthusiasts, the track guys that buy every series of GT3 to beat on. I was just saying, as you were away there, that it's nice to see that this thing still has a manual offering that's getting obviously rarer and rarer. Glad to see that, especially, infamously the 991.1 GT3 did not initially have a manual option, it was PDK only. And then when the dot two came out and they added that stick shift as an option, from what I've heard, it's like a 90% take rate to the PDK because so many people were, desperate and clamoring to get that manual option back. So
yeah,
I'm happy to see that they're still offering, that 3-pedal option for people.
it definitely is nice. I mean, nothing beats a manual. Let's be honest here. Nothing beats a manual unless, I don't know, some people say a good DSG is really nice, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's one thing like with the GT2 RS, I understand the PDK a bit more, where once you're over 700 horsepower, you really don't want to have to start changing gears, especially if you're trying to actually set really good lap times. But a car like a GT3, I personally would be buying as a canyon back road car, so I inherently want that third pedal option.
You want that third pedal for sure.
Have that engagement with the vehicle. So I'm glad to see that that's still an option with these cars.
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
Otherwise it seems to be just more GT3, which is not at all a bad thing, not a complaint by any stretch.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I guess in other news, this is kind of a bigger kind of thing. Jaguar is now going all electric, and Ben, you seem to have the inside scoop on this, so I'm gonna let you take off with it.
Yeah, this was one that was also dropping pretty recently here. Just in the last couple of days that Jaguar announced this. I think this Motor Trend's article just published today for it. Yes, it did that. I first saw this announcement, but yeah, a lot of companies, and we were discussing it, I think previously, that a lot of companies have been announcing switches to electric in the next coming years. GM, I think by 2035, they said they wanted most passenger cars, light duties to be electric. Some companies into the late 2020s. But I think this, to my knowledge, is one of, if not the earliest date now ever announced. Jaguar saying that they want their whole lineup to be electric by 2025. And they stressed as well, this does not mean that they're hoping to have, all electric cars only releasing after 2025. They are saying that there will not be a gas production car for sale from that company in 2025.
Holy crap.
So, that means that glorious 5-liter supercharged V8 from the F-Type we are seeing right now this is the last we're seeing of it. It sounds like no more of the old 5.0, no more of the 3-liter supercharged 6. One of the only good sounding production V6s. One no more of the Turbo 4, nothing. It sounds like, interestingly, they're going entirely to electric in the next 4 years, which is the crazy part to me is the timeline of this, because they just canceled the XJ electric car. So they have one electric vehicle. They were about to have a second, and they canceled it. So they have one, and they now claim that they'll
Oh
have the whole lineup
no.
converted to electric now. I mean, good on them trying to modernize, I guess.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I don't know how they're going to pull it off this quickly. I'm very curious to watch the next 4 years now, because it's so late to announce this that they must be determined to get to that point. Like it must be a realistic goal to them,
Yeah.
unless this is just some sort of stock manipulation, or like we're trying to get an investor in, so we're lying thing. I don't know, but it seems like they have faith that they're going to hit this target. And it's interesting. I wouldn't have thought Jaguar of all companies to be the one to say this either. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. I think they were still offering even diesels until pretty recently. They might even still, to my knowledge, be offering them. So it's funny to just go from
Hmm.
that straight into a life fully EV so quickly is fascinating.
Yeah, it's definitely strange. It'll be weird to see the Jaguars lineup sort of move on to electric, especially the F type. If they keep that going, that'll be a strange one to see go
That's my
into.
question too. Yeah,
Yeah, like are
what
they going to
will
keep that
that do
going?
as an electric? Yeah, because they say here too, like again, that they're doing full electrification. Where I don't think, to my knowledge, it doesn't sound like that means that there will be hybrids either. It sounds like fully
Yeah,
electrified. So
just
won't
all
be like some
electric.
sort of hybrid V6 electric combo or anything. It's just straight up not going to have an engine anymore in it. So
Yeah, like because we both looked at the new F Type while we were at the auto show, and that was an impressive looking car. I was taken aback by it. It would definitely be weird to see them go all electric. I mean, I would never have pictured a vehicle like that go electric. So it'll definitely be sad to see that happen, but I totally understand why they're doing it, and I'm totally willing to accept that as a choice because, well, I mean, at times are changing. Sometimes we have to do these things. I mean, I think Ford even announced at some point that they were going to do all electric, but it's some far off date. I think if I'm correct, I'll have to Google that real quick.
yeah, it's a lot of guys have said it pretty down the line. That's yeah, again, the most interesting point is more than anything just that their timeline goals are so seemingly optimistic for this vehicle. But or for this lineup, I should say. But yeah, I mean, we'll see, I guess, over the next couple of years what they end up doing here, as a company that didn't seem that forward into electrification in the first place. Curious to see what all they end up doing with this.
Yeah, just going back to the Ford thing, it looks like they may be doing the same thing GM's doing, which is 2035.
Mm, yeah, that's
Yeah,
about right. That
yeah,
seems like a more reasonable goal. I feel like the
yeah.
timeline, 14 years.
Even though they've just announced the new electric Ford F-150, I think the all electric one, so that'll be nice.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see when the actual specs of that truck release. Since similar to that GT2, it's been like in the ether as basically official for a year, but we don't know
We don't
for
actually
sure
know the
much, yeah,
specs. Yeah.
details. So especially with the new Hummer EV coming out, and
Mm-hmm.
the Rivian trucks, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe the Cybertruck eventually, whenever Elon figures out how much money he has to bribe the Highway Safety Administration with to pass the crash safety testing for that truck. Um, but yeah, I
Right.
guess before we roll into our big topic this week, I just had a quick little opinion piece to drop in here,
Cool, man.
which credit to once again Motor Trend this week, always killing with some news side here, but they did some renderings for what the new theoretical new Nissan Xterra would look like if it was based on that new updated Frontier we discussed last week.
Yep.
And for those who don't know, I'm a big Xterra fan. So I had to just share this because I simply want it.
You just simply
And
want it.
I think it just looks really cool. I always thought the exteriors looked pretty neat, but I think these render images with the little portal rear 3/4 window still having the upper cup handles and stuff, the really brawny front square end, I think it's just a very sharp looking vehicle. The little fake rear door and stuff I think they put in the concept images too reminds me a little bit, if you ever saw the old Hennessy Velociraptor SUVs, reminds me a little bit of that with the excursion like bubbled rear end,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and the truck like taillights, which I'm a really big fan of.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think this thing looks really sharp. There have some comparison images to the older Xteras here. I was trying to get my hands on one of these for a while before I got my Durango. So the last generation body style, kind of in the earlier years. These first gens they made supercharged, but I was never a big fan of the styling of them.
Right.
I
Right.
was always a little more inclined to get the later year models.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure how your feelings are about these older Xteras here. I always like the body shape though, the two-tier roofline thing, the corner handles and stuff. It's always an interesting looking
Yeah,
vehicle.
they remind me a little bit of the discos, the older
Mhm.
discos. I'm more of a fan of the facelifted version, that version of the Xterra. And if they were to continue keeping the Xterra line going, which I don't know if Toyota's or sorry, Nissan, whoops. I pretend I didn't say Toyota. If Nissan actually does continue or does decide to do something like that, which I don't know they would, that would be neat to see with the new Frontier headline or headlights and fascia tail lights. It would just look super neat. I tend to agree with you. I think I would want one as well because they're super neat. They're like a baby discovery, you could say. But
Yeah, it does the mild off-road SUV, kind of like the reminds me of the Forerunner a little bit, and what it tries to do, but it comes in at a cheaper price point usually.
yeah,
So I like it for that reason. It's a nice like budget off-road. I have a few friends that off-road these too. They make good budget off-roaders.
do they?
And yeah, I kind of agree with yeah, you kind of said it too, but yeah, the early gens I think are a bit weird looking, like this first generation here.
Mm-hmm.
Even the facelifted first generations, they updated them later on to the kind of more revised front end. I don't think that would be considered a facelift model yet. There's a brief period where they have the old style front, but they have filled in headlights. I don't know if they have any images here, but yeah, that fully updated second generation here is definitely the sharper looking. This is an earlier here, pre-facelift of the second gen, which even this body style I didn't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In comparison to a late year like these ones that change a little bit in styling. Pretty minor differences though, really between all of them. They're all fairly, I feel like, indistinguishable but from each other.
Yeah.
They still had the old Nissan Frontier interior in them. I remember driving these at Enterprise for a couple years and still got a very 2005 interior in it. But
Mm-hmm.
that would be the beauty, of course, of getting one of these brand new is that we wouldn't have to have the old school 2005 interior
You'd
anymore.
have like the brand new Frontier interior, which
Yeah.
would be kind of nice actually. The interior was kind of neat when we looked at it last episode. So yeah, that'd be interesting to see. Very cool to see Motor Trend incorporating that design language into such an older vehicle, like the new design language into an older vehicle. So it's very cool, very cool. I would agree with you if they're as good as off roading as your friends say they are, and as you say they are, then I'm sure they'd be a fun little vehicle.
Yeah, it's a
Nice.
nice little off-road alternative for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. And now on to our big topic. So this week we've decided to talk a little bit about some subcompact vehicles because as it turns out the market really really loves them. People in the city, people in Toronto, people in bigger cities, probably people in London drive around these vehicles a lot. It started with the big SUV fad when I think it was in the 90s where parents switched over from uh, did they switch over from minivans to SUVs, or was it the other way around?
Yeah, I would say it was a transition from wagons briefly into minivans there, and then right from minivans into
Into
SUVs.
SUVs.
Um,
Yeah.
I think the Ford Explorer was probably one of the earliest pioneers, I want to say, of that, the very first generations
Yes,
of
it
those.
was.
Then the Cadillac Escalades and the Lexus RXs started bringing, and the Mercedes ML started creating the luxury SUV segment, and
Yep.
then that was kind of born in as well. And yeah, we kind of had a pretty fast blow up, from that late 90s into 2010 or 12. We pretty much converted from a couple crossovers and SUVs to crossovers particularly becoming a really big thing and not conventional body on frame SUVs to now
Yep.
where most sedans just no longer exist, at least in North America.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the ones that do exist are all pretty much on time clocks at this point. I think there's only so
Yeah.
much time that they'll survive. I think the Accord and Camry specifically, you will probably see live on for a pretty long time. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think those will die super fast because the sales, particularly for the Camrys, still seem so strong.
Yeah.
Although even the Accord, if I'm being honest, I don't know how much. I feel like it's got at least one generation left, but I don't know if it's got even two in the sense that I feel like CRV
Yeah.
sales are just getting so dominating now
Yeah.
that it's not that often you can convince people to get an Accord as an alternative to a CRV or a
Mm-hmm.
Passport. So we'll see how much longer that car lives. I think the Camry probably has the best shot extended life,
Camry
but
and the Civic. Camry and the
yeah.
Civic. Yeah,
Yeah, I
those
think the
would be
compact sedans will
fun.
definitely also hold out a lot longer because they seem to, in general, still continue to have pretty decent sales. I still see personally at least a lot of Corollas on the road, a lot of new Mazda 3s. Used to see new Focuses until recently. Same with the Cruise. But yeah, still a lot of the Civics, as you say, of course, things like that. So and I don't see as many of the compact crossovers versus I feel like I see it's pretty few and far that I see new, Altimas, Fusions, Camrys, things like that anymore. They're getting rarer and rarer. I feel like that I see those larger sedans. Usually once people have a decent budget, they step straight to crossovers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of why we decided to do this big topic. I think we'll probably have another episode that we focus purely on maybe the concepts of why people have switched to crossovers and the market reasons as to it. But for today, we thought we'd just do a fun little quick ranking, kind of I guess you could say like a rank them head to head here, a little round robin sports bracket style thing,
Yeah.
and set up our list of kind of what we think are maybe the best and worst subcompact crossovers. And I guess a lot of this, I will say, is conjecture. It's based on knowledge we have from other critics and things like that. We don't necessarily have driving experience with all these cars, so it's kind of just a fun. Let's rank these because why not? A lot of people buy them and stuff. I have driven some cars off this list, I will say, from Enterprise, but the ones I have driven, I don't have experience with all, specs, all makes and models. Classic Enterprise, I tend to mostly drive the bottom of the list. I'll maybe do a little highlight thing at the end here, but I'm curious to see the ratio when we're done here of which cars I've driven that were rentals and how many are at the bottom 50% of the list. Because I have a sneaking suspicion I'll have driven the entire back of the list and not any of the front, because we have a tendency to not buy the greatest vehicles back in the day.
Yeah, I mean that's totally fair because they're beater cars to begin with. So
yeah, so I guess going off here, where do you want to start, Jeremy? Is there anyone in particular in the list you'd like to break down? I figure we maybe just throw a car on the list here. In naturally the first car will take first place, and then from there we can bump it up or down as need be and start adding some more vehicles. So any particular car you want to start off at, or anywhere in the list
like with the ones that are the best or the worst?
I mean, you could start off, doesn't even really need to be picked in order. We could start with really just about any car we wanted to here.
Okay. I've seen a lot of these vehicles out on the road, and I question how good they are. Motor Trend seems to love them, but I don't know. Let's start with the 2021 Jeep Compass, shall we? I am not a fan. I'm gonna start off with that one. What about you, man?
I must say I completely agree with you.
Not a fan.
I too do not like the Compass very much. This is one that I've had experience driving from good old Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I had some practice with these vehicles. And yeah, they I must say are not the greatest SUV. 9-speed automatic, which is infamously an FCA built and assembled transmission. I believe it was made and licensed by ZF, but FCA is the one putting it together.
So it's garbage.
For those, yeah.
So it's garbage.
I don't want to say that directly, but you're kind of correct.
Let's not slander them, but we'll just say indirectly they're bad.
Yeah, not the greatest transmission for sure. These 9 speeds were the same ones that I believe there was pending recalls for, because they would kick themselves into limp mode and stall out in intersections. That happened once when I first started with the company with a Chrysler 200. You'd hit the gas too quickly if you were in drive at a green light, and the engine would just shut off because the transmission would basically just get confused and would lock the torque converter.
Right.
Or something along those lines, and just kick the thing off. But it was not the most appealing thing when you hit the gas at a light and your car just dies in an active intersection. And I've always had fear of that transmission since, and they've never really sorted the timing of it out, or the shift management. They've gotten better, but never really perfect. I would say the V6 Cherokee probably has the smoothest gearing and programming for that transmission, but smoothest is not saying that it is inherently smooth. It is just the least problematic. Design. So I don't really like it's one of those cars. I think the interior is kind of cheap. They're not super. They've been proven statistically from Consumer Reports and stuff. From what I've seen, they're not very reliable engine, or transmission, or car in general, really. The only thing I think it is going for it is I do think they're one of the sharper looking in the subcompact segment, especially. I think subcompact crossovers in general tend to have they have a tendency to look cheap and ugly in general.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeeps tend to hide that a little. Although I also think that the reason Jeep hides that well is I find a lot of Jeeps also tend fully spec to be like this Compass. I'm pretty sure you can spec them into like the $40,000 range. Definitely you can in Canada. And to me, that kind of money for a car that is a subcompact is a lot. So, and the Compass is the same thing. Or Cherokee, sorry, Cherokee's fully loaded are like $50,000. And
Right.
I just, as much as it's better, it's just not better enough to justify its price tag, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I totally get it. I don't know. I think that the Trail Hawks, what are they calling it? The Trail Hawks or the Track Hawks? Trail Hawks. They're okay. They're okay looking, but just like the baseline ones, I don't know. They say Motor Trend says that they're good for off-roading and stuff like that, basic off-roading. I would beg to differ because looking at this does not look like an off-road vehicle. This looks like something you putt around town in.
I've seen video proof that these can do the Rubicon Trail and things like that, but it's one of those like the videos, this and the Renegade I've seen do those trails take a lot of damage and are not in the best shape when they're done the trail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's one of those things, anyone that would even, how many people drive a Jeep Wrangler and don't even go off road once? Or if they do, their version of off road is a gravel driveway. Anyone that's actually going to consider going on the Rubicon Trail won't even drive a stock Wrangler on it. They'll drive a modified one. Like, not to
Really?
mention a stock, Trailhawk Compass. It's just not something that goes on the Rubicon Trail. The only reason they put those stickers on is they do it in testing once to say that it can do it, and then it does it so that they can sell it with the marketing that it can do it. But it's not that it ever, most vehicles with the Rubicon Trail logo, I assume, are never going to see the Rubicon Trail. Um,
No,
it is
no.
just a brag point essentially for clout Jeep points to say like I'm a Jeep bro or it's a Jeep thing you wouldn't understand.
It's a Jeep thing.
Um,
You wouldn't understand.
yeah. So at the end of the day, with where the list currently stands, as there is no cars listed, it is first place. However, I think we can take a bet that it's not going to stay in first place for very long.
Mm.
Um, so for now, I will award, the Jeep Compass as number one here, but I don't believe it will be living in this position for long.
No, it will not be staying in that position for very long. Anyways, Ben, would you like to pick the next one?
Sure, yeah. Let's grab another off the list here. We'll keep it FCA themed for a little bit since we're already in here.
Sweet. Love
And we'll
that.
touch upon we're gonna stay in the FCA family, but we're gonna change it up
Cool.
ever so slightly, and we're gonna talk about the Fiat 500X. Now this is one that I think some people might forget. If you're anything like me, you might know a lot about cars, but you might still go, didn't the 500X get discontinued a few years ago? And
Yeah.
as far as I know, I don't think it actually did, it seems.
What?
And I kind of would have thought that it did, but I'm
I,
seeing, you see 2021 labels on these things online and stuff, and it seems that this is still an SUV being sold to the public.
you're kidding
Um,
me.
so it's interesting to me in general that it even exists, because I really didn't think
Yes.
that these were still out. And I must say, just quickly going on Fiat's website to kind of price these things out too. Starting price for a base model is $33,000, which
No.
which is I'm going to be honest, that's a lot of money
Yes, it
for
is.
for a Jeep. Now I will say the most expensive model is only 34 too, so it seems that the base to loaded, you're not losing or gaining many features. They all have the same 9-speed auto, all the same 1.3 liter multi-air turbo engine. So the 1.3, I will say, is a more interesting motor than the previous Compass engine we were just discussing. Bolts did the same 9-speed automatic. But I will say, similar to the Compass, I have not heard a single good thing about the reliability of the multi-air
Mm.
engine. So that is kind of my concern, I guess, more than anything, would be, once again, just like the previous vehicle, boils down, and this is kind of an FCA theme in general, but it boils down to reliability or lack thereof. And
Yeah.
I don't know how well you can really depend on one of these 500Xs. And I think it's interesting just to see the lack of them on the road too is an interesting.
Yeah, because I don't see a lot of
Um,
them. I knew that they existed. I just didn't see them a lot. I don't see them a lot. So I'm wondering what's going on with that.
Yeah, this is another one I've driven actually previously with Enterprise. Was in a rental fleet for a brief period of time, and I must say they drove in the snow quite well. The all-wheel drive system was tuned actually pretty good. They were fun. They did the Fiat thing where they had an interesting interior. They were a little unique, a little different. Um, but at the end of the day, overall, it didn't really do. It stood out to me in the way that it was more interesting than like a Jeep Renegade or something similarly sized or a Jeep Compass. But I don't think the pricing reflects the slightly like you're getting 5% more interesting of a car, but you're paying once you're into the 30s, like we're talking CRV money, like well equipped Honda
Yeah.
CRV money. We're
Yep.
talking Mazda CX-5.
So there's
Like there's
better
some
value for
decent
money.
vehicles into that price point. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. um and yeah, it looks like in 2020 Fiat sold 1443 500 X's.
Oh, say it isn't
So
so.
they're not selling much, it looks like.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Just not
Yeah,
surprised.
24 fully loaded in the States, still pretty pricey. Or that started at the base price. 29 is the fully loaded price. So here, if the base is at 34, then you're probably looking at a loaded price of over $40,000. And
Hmm.
that's again, it's the Jeep syndrome. That's a lot of money for the amount of vehicle you're getting. The handling isn't really standout. Dependability isn't really standout. Horsepower is fine. It's adequate, maybe above average for the segment, you could argue, but it's not anything crazy.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts about this car, Jeremy, other than its unusualness and the fact the absurdity that it even exists?
I don't know if I was sad to see Fiat go. I like the Fiat. I like the standard 500s. Not I didn't like the 500Ls. I wasn't a huge fan of that. This just the 500X just seems kind of, I don't know, unnecessary. I mean, it's a better European market vehicle than it would be in the States. I don't see it really appealing to a vast audience. And so to that, I just sort of say, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. Really. And so it will go number 2 on our list, but it won't stay there for long. Because there are plenty of other SUVs out there that are CUVs that are far better, um, for value for money. Because I bet you anything, this thing is probably going to be good junk. Sorry.
Yeah, we unfortunately, I do think I agree that it does get relegated to number 2 simply due to a lack of value, particularly being its largest downfall.
Yep.
And no real stellar advantages to set it apart from any
Oh
competing
no.
SUVs that cost significantly less. You're buying it for the brand name, essentially, to
Mm-hmm.
say you're an Italian car and to have the interesting, unique. It's kind of like when you buy a Mini, but you're getting it. But even Mini, I would argue, does the build quality thing at least. They do some stuff that makes them stand out a little bit more. Fiat's not really doing any
They're
of it
not.
other than
No.
just being interesting for the sake of being interesting. And even if you want to buy it just for that 1.3 multi-air to say you have a turbo engine or to straight pipe it to try to sound like an Abarth, you can get that multi-air turbo in I believe the Compass or the Renegade as well. I know you can get it in the Renegade. I'm not sure about the Compass.
Mm.
But yeah, that engine's available in other Jeep products. So to me, there's just not enough point to really give this thing anything higher than second place. And I think that it will continue to probably drop down this list
Oh, it will. It
probably
will.
fairly substantially if I had to take a guess. We'll see how we unfold here. But I don't think, from my experience with them, and again, talking about Fiat reliability, Enterprise had very few of these, but the ones we had, none of them worked correctly. They were breaking fairly often with electrical issues. So not the
I'm not
most promising car.
surprised. Not surprised. Never really been a fan of those vehicles. Just we may as well just move right along to something that is, I think, is personally hilarious just because of its name. Are you ready, kids? It is the 2020 Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross. I think that the name is absolutely hilarious, much like how we don't like how the Mustang Mach E was given the Mustang nameplate at first. I still don't like the Eclipse name being put on the Cross because it looks a little bit like smaller Aztec. So I'm not a fan of this vehicle whatsoever. The styling is just too much. I'm about to share my screen so you guys can see what I'm looking at. Here it is. The ugly rear end of this vehicle. Now, I can't say anything for its reliability because I haven't driven one. But what I can say is that this just, it's questionable that it got the Eclipse name. I've heard people say things like, maybe Mitsubishi doesn't want to make cars anymore. They do a lot of things that are great, that can make them money. But I don't see it being like, maybe they're just not interested in making cars anymore because they put the Eclipse name on that. Come on.
Yeah. So I can speak slightly to Mitsubishi's reliability. Again, a car in Enterprise's rental fleet, and I've driven these as well. Completely agree. It's blasphemous that this has the Mitsubishi name tag.
Or the Eclipse name, yeah.
And honestly, or the yes, the Eclipse, sorry, tag. I am so spiteful against this vehicle. It takes so much professionalism and objectivity here in my heart to just not put this in last out of principle, because I really want to. But I will try and speak to its positives, and be honest about it, which is to say, I think it is slightly less shitty than the 500X. That's all I
Okay.
really have for defense, to be honest. I don't even think it's good per se.
That's the only
I think
defense.
mainly I think it's equally it's equally bad, maybe even slightly worse. However, its price is significantly cheaper.
It
So
is.
inherently, because of that, and because there's a few more tech features, I think it has to get the nod. 500X also hasn't been redesigned in several years. The Eclipse Cross is newer, so it's got a few more tech features. It's just a better technically car. So for that reason, I can't give it last. However, I'm now going to proceed to rip this thing apart a little bit.
Go for it.
The second row has no headroom due to the styling lines they're doing to the back here. The headrest, if you can maybe find, I don't know if you can find any interior pictures of the actual back seats, but they had quite literally the most uncomfortable headrests I've ever felt in a car. It's specifically an issue with the back seat headrests. You can kind of see here in this picture how the headrests pop about 4 inches further forward than the seat actually sits.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
can kind of see that there's like a lip for the headrest.
Mhm.
And those headrests fully extended don't even go taller. I don't even know what headrests those are, because those are not the ones that I've.
Oh, that's probably the Mitsubishi Outlander. Is this it?
Yes, that
There
is
we go.
actually, because those are, yep, that's that looks
That's better.
appropriately
Sorry
weird.
about that, folks.
Yeah, so those basically fold up, not even to the height that they're above where the seat ends. So they're always forwards. So when you sit in a car,
Oh.
basically you're sitting like this, where your head is like slightly forward of your
Yep.
body and your neck is like inclined downward.
Yep.
And as someone that's 6'1", or as Doug would say, I'm about 6'1", maybe 6'2", depending. But my head like brushes cleanly against the ceiling as my neck is like kinked forward. You can't see out the back of it because of that stupid taillight bar design choice.
Mhm.
In the middle, the entire interior is controlled by a track mouse pad for the infotainment system, but
Terrible.
it's still Mitsubishi's outdated infotainment screen. So the UI was already behind. You add a toggle wheel that doesn't respond properly. The trackpad's slow to reply, and isn't intuitive to use. So it basically means you take your eyes off the road to do anything with the infotainment system. It has no volume knob. It is the stupid touch capacitive. You like tap, 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 like the Doug, you remember playing the tap, 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 tap as you try to turn your volume up, or pinch your finger on it and just hold it there to slowly crank the volume.
God.
Your real adjustment option is on the steering wheel. While we're looking at these pictures, I must say too, Mitsubishi has, in my opinion, one of the cheapest steering wheels in the automotive market. I think that wheel just looks, in general, like very inexpensive. And on a $20,000 RVR, I can kind of get it. Once you're into 40K or something for a well-equipped Eclipse Cross, I don't see the price justification anymore. Maybe 35, maybe not 40, but yeah, overall, I was really disappointed driving these. I didn't expect them to be good in the first place, but if anything, my one hope was that it's the first Mitsubishi to have this new 1.5 liter turbocharged engine. And I thought maybe having a turbo and the torque shove and boost, maybe it'll drive different than the RVR and feel peppier than the RVR's 2 liter that made roughly the same horsepower. And after driving the RVR, I found out that it doesn't drive any better than the 2 liter
Oh
from the old
no.
RVR, and it feels just as slow. If anything, the turbo lag feels like it does that thing where your CVT is not super well programmed, where like the CVT revs, start going up, and then then you want the turbo to spool, and then by the time this turbo spools, the CVT flares because your foot's so far on the throttle at that point because you're waiting for the engine to do something. And then the turbo finally spools and the car takes off. And then you're like, I didn't want that much. And you lift a little, but then the you run out of boost, and then it also leaves CVT range, and you have to hit the gas again, and then it goes back and back. And it's just that bouncing back and
Oh
forth of
no.
the transmission and engine fighting between programming.
What a
And it
mess.
just isn't tuned well in general. And the biggest issue, and I went on the Mitsubishi website to confirm, with the Eclipse Cross, its biggest downfall is that the Mitsubishi RVR here in Canada starts for $6,000 less, and I don't think it's any worse of a car, personally.
Really?
I think it's slightly smaller, but honestly, it's not really much usable space you lose between the two. And I think if you actually want space, then just pay the extra $1,000 to get right into an Outlander instead, which is a noticeably better driving vehicle and feels more substantial on the road. Interior is still very cheap, but other than that, it does drive better. So yeah, if you're trying to get into the cheaper compact segment, just get the RVR. The 2021 model does increase the starting price by a few $100s, but yeah, outside of that, it's still, you're several thousand under the price of a Eclipse Cross, and I think it's just absolutely worth your money to just save it and get the RVR, because it's not any worse. I don't know. I'm not saying you should get either of these cars, but I'm saying if you're going to get one of them, it's not worth the extra money you're spending to get that Eclipse Cross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of what Mitsubishi's putting out nowadays. I tend to just avoid Mitsubishi as much as humanly possible, except for the Lancer. I like the Lancer. It's nice. I even considered purchasing one, or I'm considering purchasing one. It's on the list of vehicles that I would purchase if I had the option to buy a new vehicle. So I don't know. I don't know. I'm just not a huge fan of Mitsubishi right now. Come back to me when you introduce the Eclipse as something better than what it currently is offering. Like, because the nameplate,
Yeah, and
yeah,
as I have a few Eclipse friends too, and DSM friends, and the community was not happy about this decision. And now Mitsubishi lost these guys as customers years ago, so I don't think Mitsubishi necessarily cares about losing them as customers. But
nope.
at the very least, their brand is being, I think, diluted in the auto market aftermarket world for the decision to go with that Eclipse name. I think it was clearly a mistake. It was such a lazy brand cachet grab of like,
It
look, remember
was.
Eclipse? And it's like anyone that bought an Eclipse is not buying the Eclipse car. Like, it's just not the same demographic.
No. Yeah,
So
so there we go. I'll stop the share and we can move on to the next one. Ben, would you like to go down the list and maybe come up with another one?
yeah, before I guess as we go to do this ranking here, as I stated before, I
Oh,
can't in
right.
good conscience give it last place. Now the question here then remains, because this car is not great either, is it better or worse than a cheap Compass? Then that's the interesting question we've got here. Now, I think
Ooh.
it is technically slightly worse from a pure car to car standpoint. However, when you factor value in, that's when I think it becomes an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
Because that Jeep does demand, even though I just complained about the Eclipse Cross costing too much, it is still several thousand cheaper than a well-equipped Compass.
Right.
So, and I don't know how much we want to factor this into ranking on our own personal list here, but I do know with Mitsubishi dealers, they have a tendency when you walk in that you can negotiate some pretty good,
Really?
lease and finance payments with them, because their cars sell so poorly. They
That's
kind of are
true.
desperate to get rid of them. I've heard with the Mirage in particular that that's like they're basically cutting 40% of the cost off that car,
Wow.
because they just can't get rid of them. So for that reason, factoring that in, I would question that it would arguably maybe deserve first, but I don't know how much weight you want to take in basically a dealer negotiation in the class of the car, because it's not directly in regards to the quality of the car, but it does bring into question the value of it. So
It
a bit of a tricky
does.
one.
I mean, I would venture to say it would be good for second place, but with all that cost factoring, maybe it makes the cut. I don't know for the
Yeah, and
first
we
place.
we are splitting hairs a little in this reasoning that, again, not to spoil this list, but none of these are going to stay in the top three. So
No, no, they're not.
we're really unintentionally starting from the bottom of the barrel here, even
We
though we're
really
picking
are.
random. So yeah, it's kind of a redundant thing to even um you know pick or whatever, but you know what, let's play this game. We're gonna play a nice even random generator way to solve this.
Okay.
Let's play a high-low game here. I'm just gonna think of a number between
Okay.
1 and 10, and you're gonna guess what number that is. And if you guess a higher number, then we are ranking it higher. If you guess a lower number, we're ranking it lower. Simple
Okay.
as that. All right. So let me think of my number here for a minute.
It's between 1 and 10, right?
Yes, you got it. And all right, whenever you're ready.
7.
Oh, it's lower than that. So number 2 goes the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross. All
Oh
right. A nice
man.
nice neutral way to decide that one.
Fantastic. All right, cool, man. All
Alrighty,
right.
well, I will write this one in, and as I do so, I will begin to discuss the next car on this list here. And this is another, we'll keep themed with maybe a little bit of not an oldie, and instead actually jump into a new car, since a few of these are, I guess the Eclipse Cross isn't super old in its segment, but
It's
we'll
not
go into
super
something
old.
that's
It's a little old.
a little bit older in the segment, but I would argue even though it's older, it is arguably better. And that is the Mazda CX-3.
Ooh, I knew you were gonna go for that one.
Yeah, so the CX-3 is Mazda's most compact crossover. They've now added into this lineup a little bit more with the CX-30, which is based off the Mazda 3 chassis, but is still roughly the size of a subcompact crossover. The versus the Mazda CX-3, which is firmly planted on the Mazda 2 chassis, but is riding with interior dimensions that are roughly that of the Mazda 3. Now, the CX-3 is pretty old at this point. I don't think it's seen a major refresh in several years. So it's still running, although it's still running a lot of the modern tech. It's still got the Skyactiv 2-liter engine, still got the 6-speed torque converter lockable automatic. It still gets, absurdly good fuel economy like any Skyactiv based, Mazda engine does. Overall, it's a good vehicle still, but it is getting more long in the tooth in general. I'm curious. I've actually been curious more than anything if these things were actually going to get a redesign again, with the Mazda CX-30 and stuff. And I don't really know. The Mazda 2s in general kind of on an interesting trajectory right now because it's being co-developed with Toyota. But yeah, it appears 2016 was the model year beginning and 2015 was the production. So these things have been around for about 5 years now, and they are clearly on that old Mazda 3 interior still. They're on the old more Mazda 3 looks. I do think they've done a decent job in facelifting these up, but they're still definitely on the more dated side. They're getting older by the year. To my knowledge, I'm not sure if they've even added Apple CarPlay and Android Auto because I know it wasn't initially a feature. You would hope they've added them by now, but and I've sat in these at dealers and stuff. This is unfortunately actually the only Mazda I think at all, because I drove a 32. Yeah, this might be the only Mazda actually I've not driven. It's currently in production.
Huh.
Because I've driven the last generation 6. I've driven the new 3s. I've driven the CX-3 or CX-30, sorry, the CX-5, the CX-9, the Miata. Yeah, I've driven everything but obviously not the Mazda 2 because you don't buy them here anymore, and not the CX-30 here. As Enterprise actually did start buying them when I was in Toronto, but I just never had the opportunity to drive one really any distance, at least one that I can remember. Unless it's so forgettable, I did drive it briefly and forgot. And arguably, that's more of an insult to the car than anything. If it's so forgettable, I didn't realize I drove it or not. Yeah, what are your thoughts on this car, Jeremy?
The CX-3 was kind of interesting with me because I thought that the front end came up pretty strong with the front end design of the whole thing. The rear I was not in like 100% with. The CX-30 is a better designed vehicle in my personal opinion. Like I love that vehicle so much. And I think when we saw it at the auto show, I think we were both pretty taken aback by it. And you said you've driven one, right?
Yes, or not the CX-3. Sorry, I've driven the 30. Yes,
that's what I said. The 30, the CX-30.
Yes, I've driven the 30.
Impressive.
One dealer one. So yeah, the 3 I must say is a little behind the times now. However, it still has those Mazda traits. Like I said, the Skyactiv engine reliability and fuel economy. It does have the good handling of Mazda. It is sharp looking. I think it's still styled pretty well, as much as you can make comments about the back and stuff. And I do completely agree. The CX-30 is a far better looking and better designed vehicle.
Yes.
I think that this, though, compared to previous cars we were just discussing, the Jeep Compass, the especially the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, I think this looks far sharper than something like that. I think if anything, the biggest downfall of this car is it doesn't carry over with the Mazda build quality as much as others.
Hmm.
I've from what I've heard from my friends that have worked at Mazda dealers and things like that, these are pretty tinny. The doors feel cheap, the speakers feel cheap. You can tell that this is a Mazda 2. You go on the highway, they rev kind of high, they're noisy, they're windy. They're just not the most, they scream that they're an economy like subcompact crossover. And Mazda, I think, has done a better job of dampening and hiding those things over the years. And I think this is an
Yeah.
earlier era where they weren't quite as good at hiding that kind of stuff.
You know,
So,
and so for that, I think we should probably mark this one higher, like probably at the top of the list for now. I mean, because it's better quality from what you're saying. It's better quality. It's just nicer. I mean, minus some of the minor foibles that come with this car. But I'll stop sharing so you can pull up the list.
yeah, I completely agree. I think for now, at least, it definitely needs to be in first place. And I think that it in general, I think arguably would have in its first time when it came out in 2015, possibly been the best in this class. We'll see later as this unfolds, but I don't think this is going to end on the top. And I do think
No.
it's fallen from grace a little over the years, but I still think this is a fairly competitive vehicle, a good used option for people. And at one time, I think was actually arguably the king of this segment.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with you on that one. Okay. Well, I'll go down the list and pick something that I think is nice. Why don't we go with something as non-controversial as the 2021 Honda HR-V? Now, this is pretty non-controversial because I don't know, they don't seem to be bad in any way, shape, or form, from what I've heard at least. Like nobody's complaining about them. I haven't seen any real issues with them. When they were new, it grabbed my mother's attention because she thought that it would be a great replacement for her 2006 Honda CRV. And I don't know, she came across a better deal with the car that we currently have now. But either way, this car, from what I've heard, pretty great. I like it because it's small. It's a Honda. That's another reason why. I just feel that Honda did a pretty good job with that vehicle. Do you want to pull up pictures? Do you want me to pull up pictures?
I can pull up some photos here. Yeah, I agree with you. As you say, it's it's a very good way to describe it. That the HRV is kind of one of those cars that it kind of just does no wrong without being particularly stellar at the same time either. It kind of just
Mm-hmm.
it just
Mm-hmm.
exists.
It's a little bit
But
boring though.
yeah, it's definitely a bit of a clinical car, which Hondas, I mean, already kind of have a bit of a tendency to be. I think its styling is fairly sharp.
Yeah.
I think something too with the subcompact segment that it hasn't really come up in discussion yet, but will later, is I like that these so far everything we've mentioned is a quote unquote real, for lack of a better term, crossover, in the sense
Yes.
that nothing is offered in just front wheel drive, which I have a significant problem with in the world of crossovers to not even offer all wheel drive.
Mm-hmm.
Front wheel drive is an option is one thing, it is the only option is another. And I think these HRVs though are fairly sharp looking. They are, as you say, a good replacement to something like maybe not even an '06, but especially like a '99 CRV, or if you have
Yep.
a really early, the classic discussion of cars always get bigger. This is the size of a first gen CRV. This is before the CRV got fat.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so for that reason, if you like that kind of stuff, here's this is my boss's spec. Actually, my boss drives one of these in this exact flat gray.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, it's just a good, economy commuter vehicle. I think this is one of those situations where I would lean to more something like a Mazda CX-3 myself. But I think if a normal person, like your Joe Schmo was ordering one of these, I would be more inclined to recommend to them the HRV,
Yeah.
just due to the Honda reliability, the durability of the 2 liter. If anything, I think the most questionable thing with this car is the use of Honda CVT, which I
Mhm.
believe was a little questionable for liability in its early years, but I think at this point has been sorted enough that that's not even really a concern. Um, so overall, seems like a pretty promising vehicle. I know for sure I've heard amazing things about the packaging of this car. I know the interior is supposed to have a boatload of space for the size it is.
Yeah.
Um, from the pictures I'm seeing here too, it seems like an interesting use of the passenger having the triple
I
vent
love
layout.
that.
That's
Yeah,
kind of
it's
an
super
interesting
cool.
design. The interior seems to me in a glance far less, and this is one I actually have not driven or been in at all, actually. So I don't want to speak too much on the interior quality, but at a glance, it seems far better than
Yep.
the vehicles we've looked at so far, at the very least. Not that it'll be better than everything on this list per se, but I think so far it does the best in interior quality. Um, and it promises, it seems like the dynamics and the driving experience are really what hinders this vehicle the most.
Mm.
Um, and the fact that from what I've seen or heard from people in complaints and things like that is that this thing is not particularly engaging or enjoyable as a drive. It's very much, you know, designed just for functionalities,
Yeah, just for
purpose, and
function.
things like that.
And so for that, do we want to put this sort of higher up on the list? Do we want it? Would you say it's better? Would you say it's better practicality wise than the CX3, or what would you say?
Yeah, this is where the discussion gets a little more interesting, because interesting. So this is just I was curious to confirm. It's actually the 1.5 liter, it appears, VTEC engine, not the 2 liter. So it's actually a naturally aspirated version
Hmm.
of their turbocharged 1.5, which explains why it's so down in horsepower, 130 horsepower. So it's low in power, which I'm not a huge fan of. You can get it with a 6-speed manual, which is kind of cool. I don't know if
Nice.
that's a European only thing or if domestics we are allowed to do that at all. I do not know, but I think that that's pretty neat.
Very neat.
In general, though, it's a tricky one because I think the CX3 has it definitively beat in the respects of what do you call it now? Totally drawing a blank now. Dynamics and how it drives. And versus, something like this Honda is so much further to the side of practicality. So it really boils down to one of those, what are you looking for the most out of a vehicle? I think you can't go wrong for reliability on either of these.
Correct.
The Honda CVT is sometimes questionable, but it hasn't been in so long. I don't really want to ding it for that on its own. If anything, I would again critique its horsepower, but the Mazda also has that problem. So really it boils down to, do you want better turning radius or do you want a better packaged interior? And I think I want to lean to maybe giving it to the Honda simply because it does both interior space better and ergonomics, and it also does interior better. So it's two different, functionality things that it's improving on over the Mazda. And I think for that, I would be more inclined to give the first place to the
Yeah.
Honda.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that one for sure because you can't really go wrong with Honda. As far as I've heard, you can't go wrong with some of the newer Hondas.
Yeah, there's on occasion they're not a flawless company, but in general, I think they're usually a fairly safe bet. And these HRVs, from the amount I'm seeing on the road, and I'm not seeing any beat up or anything,
No, yeah.
they seem to be doing pretty well. And hurts to see Mazda falling off the top as someone that's
Mm,
so impartial, by a little biased to the brand and loves them so much.
you're
But
a little bit biased. I mean, there's a Ford. Trust me, there's a Ford on this list, but I'm not going to be biased about it because I know it's bad.
yeah, that's one that I don't think we're going to be the most fond on forward wise.
No.
Um, and you know what? Because we're already discussing it, shall we maybe just cover that car next
You
and
know what? Let's just go for it. You know what? Because
yeah, discuss the lovely Ford EcoSport.
yes, now let's get this straight out of the way. Let's get this clear. It is not EcoSport because Ford wants us to pronounce it EcoSport, and for that it loses some points for me. Just off the top, for that part. But just practicality wise and reliability wise, from what I've heard, this thing, just from a person who actually, because I have a person, I know someone personally who works for Ford and drives the vehicles to and from dealerships. He drove this car and said that this car is literally a pile. If you know what I mean. And that he questions its long-term reliability because it's just it's not great. And people have already said, I think reviewers have said that this vehicle is not great. And if you want, I can pull up pictures or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, your friends are quite right. I think from what I've seen in these, another one that I've driven myself and I thought was very underwhelming. In general, I'm not really a big fan of these cars. Yeah, it's hard to say what can be said here. It's got a few of the issues of the Ranger, where this vehicle's already been out for several years in other foreign markets. It just came more recently to North America. So because of that, it's still got a lot of outdated Ford tech in it. It's not particularly advanced. Still using some older Ford engines, some older Ford transmissions. One of the big things people always point out here is that the tailgate actually opens sideways. It swings out like an old RAV4 or
Don't love
something.
that.
And that's because it's usually got a spare tire, a fifth tire on the back of it, because
Yes, it
in
does.
this used to be sold for years in Brazil and stuff where the roads aren't very good. And India and all these other more developing countries that the roadways aren't as clear. So for that reason, it was designed one way, and that's just not the way the market has gone. Now, if you can, I don't know if you can find any pictures of the trunk latch opening in these Ford EcoSports, but the really funny thing with these that we always made joke about, yeah, there's the lovely picture of it with its side swung open. And it's hard to say because you need a picture of the hatch actually closed to see it, but the
Oh
handle is
yeah.
quite
It's in the
strange to
it's in the
open.
light, correct?
Exactly. There, that might be a picture that encapsulates it there, the red
This one
one.
right here?
But yeah, I don't know if you can capture it here in this
You can
clip,
kind of
but
see it's there.
yeah, the little right side upper kind of cutout for where it looks like there'd be a reverse light. There's a button inside there for the trunk to open. And
Oh,
we always made
shoot.
jokes at Enterprise that it was just the hardest. The amount of employees I had to teach how to open the back of these up because they just did not know that. And who would think really that how do you open the trunk? Oh, you reach your hand into your tail light and
Into
then
your
press a
tail light,
button that's
yeah.
in there. Like it just sounds so ridiculous. And every customer you rented one of these to, you had to show them in the walk around how to open the trunk. Because if
Yep.
you didn't tell them, they would never know. It was this and the newer Buick Regals where it's you have to press down on the Buick logo. Those are the two cars that
Really?
no one could figure out how to open. Buick, especially because the logo only moved like an inch when you pushed on it. The Volkswagen ones, like, tapping on the top and pulling on them, the hinge moves so much that I think a lot of people can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been around for a few years now, which might help too. But yeah, that trunk latch thing used to bother me a lot. They had no back seat space whatsoever. You could not fit a human in there. Car seats at best, what you're doing. There is no spot for legs if you are someone like my height. Like if you're over anywhere near 6 foot and you have to set the seat in front, the driver or passenger seat to that height, your interior rear seats are now going to be pressed against the back seat of the car. The trunk has no depth to it. You can't fit anything unless you put the second row down. The interior is really cheap. The transmission slips first gear, even though it's not one of the wet clutch Ford transmissions. It's a regular 6-speed, but it still feels like it's slipping. The seats are kind of flat. I mean, the floor is flat, which I guess is good for space, but the seats don't really have any support in them. The vehicle sits very upright because, again, foreign market car, it was supposed to have ground clearance in a lot of places. So you sit very on a bench and you're kind of just forward and going.
Right.
It feels very cheap. I would be concerned with the front wheel drive models because they use the 1-liter 3-cylinder EcoBoost engine about reliability. The 2 liters are a little more durable, but then I start to worry about everything else breaking in this car. It was the
Yeah.
first to use the Ford floating higher mounted screen, which I was never a fan of. So yeah, overall, I don't really have anything nice to say about these. Now, I will say once I would beat on them at work, when you really started tossing them into corners, they had a bit of a fun, like, I'm sitting too high pogo-y feel to them where they
Yeah,
really would
yeah.
topple back and forth and made them a little fun to rip around and beat on for fun. But overall, not a competitive vehicle in the segment and not something I've ever recommended to someone unless it was one of those, hey, I found this thing off lease where I'm essentially paying something, like $5,000 for a 2-year-old model with no mileage or something. Then maybe I'd be like, well, if it's this good a deal and you just need a daily. But if you're not getting a crazy good price on this, I don't think they're worth the money at all.
No, and you know what? This is one of those deals where people say Europe gets a lot of the great cars, a lot of the really good versions of cars. Yeah, this is the one European car we didn't want.
Yeah.
This is
This
the
was not when we
one we
said bring your Euro Fords over, we meant like
yes,
the Focus ST wagon, not
yes,
this. Like
not
this isn't what I wanted.
this. No, please keep that car over there. We're quite happy with what we have now. Actually, you know what? If it was possible, bring back the Taurus. But because that was a good car. It was about
Yeah,
the show, the Taurus SHO.
yeah, just like the Eclipse Cross, I want to, out of spite, put this in last place because
Yeah,
I
do it.
hate that they called it the Eco Sport, and after spending years of branding the EcoBoost engines, and
Yep.
then they spell the name the exact same, and then tell people it's pronounced differently, which I don't, I just don't know why they
Like,
chose to do it this way,
I
and it
don't know.
bothers me so much. But in good conscience, I really think the 500X is a terrible vehicle
Yeah,
in so many ways that I don't know if I can really, in good conscience, put the Ford below it. Now, however, as much as I hate the Eclipse Cross a lot too, I'm curious as to which of the two is cheaper because the EcoSport is
the start
even noticeably shittier than the Cross.
the
However,
EcoSport. I'm looking at prices now. Sorry, this is the state's price. 19,995 for the base price and 27,715 for the
loaded.
upper.
Wow. So yeah, you're coming in loaded even underneath the price of a base Eclipse Cross. Now, if you're loading one up, I think the Eclipse Cross is almost worth the extra money.
It is.
However, what I'm looking at here with the Echo Sport is it's starting in Canada at 21,100, which at 21,000, that's a pretty low price.
It
I
is.
can't begrudge them for that. So I guess for that reason, I have to say that I'd recommend putting it above the Eclipse Cross. But I think I got to even put it below the Compass because at least the Compass looks half decent and is somewhat modern in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking fourth place. What do you think, Jeremy?
You know what? I'd venture to agree with you on that one for sure.
All right, fourth place it is.
Fourth place it is. Show that list.
I think I can already sense where cars like the RVR are going to go because I know how I think about them in comparison to some other stuff we've already looked at now. So credit to this vehicle in a lot of lists. This the Echo Sport was yeah, should I respell quickly so it's actually the correct
Yes, go for it. Do it.
you know what, just because. So we're gonna do
Just for
some
the
spell checking
gag.
for Ford. If you want to call it EcoSport Ford, I'll take the H out, but until you make that decision, I'm spelling it this way
We're
so
calling it
people
the
actually know.
Echo Sport.
So yeah, we're number 4 for that, where it could have been lost. It's been lost on a lot of other lists, so credit to them for not getting last place, I guess. I believe were you the picker of the Echo Sport there, Jeremy? Is it my
Yes, I
turn
was
to
because
choose a
I
vehicle?
alluded to it and then you said go for it. So I'm gonna say it's your turn.
Alrighty, well, from here, let's keep it in the old big three kind of domestic range here.
Oh boy.
And for the next one I'm going to bring up here, I'm going to bring up a new guy that's kind of hard to guess out because I haven't experienced this one either myself, and that is the Chevrolet Trailblazer.
Ooh, that is an interesting little topic there. Uh, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so this is Chevy's newest kind of foray into this class. They've already been doing the Trax, which is their super small kind of vehicle, and I guess this would slot above it if I'm not mistaken, because this is going to be under the size of the Equinox, but over the size of the Trax. So I guess to compare to a company like I'm trying to think of who's a company compared to. I guess like say Ford, it's maybe Bronco Sport to
Bronco
Escape,
Sportish.
and then all the way down to Echo, something like that. Or I guess
Yes.
Honda would be a better example. It's like the that new one, the it starts with an E, I want to say. There's the Kona, the Tucson, and then below the Kona, they've got the it's probably on this list too, I bet.
It's probably
Because
on this
it
list.
should be on this list because I know it's in the venue. I
The
don't know why I thought
venue.
it started with an
Hyundai
E.
venue, yeah.
Hyundai venue. Yes. So, it's kind of like that where it's again, as we talked about earlier today, Chevrolet dominating their own market again on like
Yep.
eating their own sales. Where it's a kind of weird crossover vehicle.
Yep.
But I mean, they're sharp looking. I give them credit for that. I think this is probably actually, I want to almost say if it wasn't for the CX-30, that this would be the best style compact crossover.
Really? That's interesting. Okay.
I'm hard pressed to think of a better. Although you know what, the new Kia Seltos looks pretty sharp too. I gotta say, so maybe it wouldn't be quite at the top, but it would be more up there than definitely something like the Trax, which I think just looks very plain. I
Okay.
think the Trailblazer does a good job of capturing what the Blazer was trying to do stylistically without costing $50,000.
Okay. Okay. Because a lot of people were pissed off that this didn't actually look like Whoops, sorry. That didn't actually look like a proper trailblazer or in the
Like the
spirit of a
older ones.
trailblazer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I do wonder a little why this wasn't called like the Jimmy or something along those lines,
yeah.
because this is far more like the cheaper compact SUV than what the last gen Trailblazer was, which was a very big 3 row. Like, it's what they essentially the Traverse or something is now.
Mm-hmm.
So it is a bit of a weird segment change for sure.
It definitely is. And so I don't know. I just think that this is kind of an odd naming choice, like especially with the Blazer. Like, because if you remember when Ford came out with the Bronco or the new Bronco when they announced it, it matched everyone's expectations, right? When they brought out that new Bronco, and then of course they had the Bronco Sport, which some people were like, it's not that great. And then of course Doug drove it and reviews came out, right? So I guess people are kind of peeved that, with the Blazer, I mean, that's a different vehicle, and the Blazer and the Trailblazer aren't in the same spirit as the original Blazer and Trailblazer.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, I guess, in the fact that it is a bit of it's that Eclipse problem where you're taking a name that kind of already forces your vehicle to be a certain idea in people's mind. So inherently by deviating from that, you're risking alienating certain customers. And I think Chevy is a bit guilty of doing that with this Trailblazer.
Yeah.
Um, it is a bit unfortunate. I think I'm not a big fan of their 9-speed tuning is better than Chrysler's. However, it's still not perfect. I still think GM interior is fairly cheap. Again, I think the quality is better than Chrysler's, uh, even though the materials are arguably worse, if that makes any sense. As far as just frequency of breaking parts and things like that. But I would. The big problem with this one is I happen to be reading SUV of the year right now, the old Motor Trend article from a month or two ago, and I just read the page on the Trailblazer last night, and the Trailblazer, well equipped, is what at least in Motor Trend's test was $33,000, which means that this thing
Jeez.
in Canada is going over 40.
40. Yep.
And at that price point, again, there's so many other things I
There's
would
so many other
be
things. I
inclined to
agree.
recommend. And I don't know if that's just a guilty vehicle of, once you option it up, its price skyrockets faster or what. But
I
yeah, for that main reason, again, just like the Jeep Compass, I think that this vehicle gets tagged from a value proposition, and that
right.
really hurts it for the
It does for the old
potential as a
score,
vehicle.
for the old score up there. But you know what? For that money, I would wait until the Bronco Sport comes out and then buy that because from Doug DeMuro's review, I'm going off of Doug DeMuro for this. It seems to be a very impressive vehicle, and so I would rather wait for a Bronco Sport.
Yeah, just checking starting prices. It's a little over $3,000 from the Trailblazer to the Blazer, or from the Trailblazer, sorry, to the Equinox. So it's still starting at 24, which is a mid-pack price, but yeah, that is still a few grand more than something like an RVR or a Echo Sport or things like that. And it's hard for me to say because I've not driven these Trailblazers, but from the interior quality I've seen from Chevy in the past and things like that, I don't know if this will greatly exceed something like a CX3. And we were just talking about the HRV earlier, which I think something like an HRV would also outdo this as a vehicle option. So I think for that reason, I think it's a bit more of a mid-pack car. Where do you think it would land in this list? This list, though, in your opinion, Jerry?
The trail. Yeah, pull up that list just so I can get a sense of what we're looking at here. The Trailblazer is, in my mind, not the best. And from what I'm hearing and from what I'm seeing from the reviews on the Motor Trend page that we were looking at, it is not impressive. And so for that, I would probably put it below the Jeep Compass, but above the Echo Sport. I don't know about you.
Interesting. I wasn't too far off there. I was thinking I was more inclined to rank it above the Jeep Compass simply due to being slightly more modernized. Jeep obviously has it in the off-road camp, but as we discussed earlier, who would ever off-road one of these things in the first place?
No.
And I think they're both horrible from a value proposition.
Yeah.
So, and I do think that the Chevy has a better chance of reliability,
Hmm.
slightly. So for that reason, I would be more inclined to, I think, rank it above the Compass in number 3 myself.
Okay, so then should we do the random number thing then?
Sure, let's go with that again.
Would you like me to do the thinking of the number and
Sure, let's flip the positions here. Yeah, think of a number and I'll play the high or low game.
okay, got one.
All right. We'll go with 4.
Ooh, I was 5.
So lower. All right.
Lower.
So that will mean then number 4
There you
is
go.
the good old Chevrolet Trailblazer. Chevrolet.
Chevrolet. Oh,
Now,
Chevrolet.
the real question here is, did they enunciate? How do they spell this Trailblazer? No lowercase. It's a
It's
lowercase
a
b. I was curious
lowercase
how that one
b.
worked. All right.
All right. And so I guess it is. Do you want to do another turn, or do you want me to do the next pick?
You can do the next pick there. If not to transition into whatever
Cool,
else we've
cool.
got on the
We got
list here.
so let's jump right into something that we did kind of talk a little bit about. We mentioned its name, but we never really got into details about it. The 2021 Hyundai Venue, pardon me. Um, First things first, I thought that its design aesthetic was actually kind of neat. Not a huge fan of the front though. That is my one big thing about it. Don't really like the front. Don't like the split lights. I think it's just a bit much. I think that the whole departure from the one headlight unit to have the HID and then the running light was kind of a messy thing to do because it broke the car up. It's doing too much. It's doing what the Pontiac Aztec kind of did, where it had the split light kind of view, and I'm not 100% sold on that front end. But on the rear, like it's fine. It's fair game. I don't think it's that bad. And from what from the score that it receives, at least on Motor Trend, which I'm sorry, I can't believe I'm bringing it up, the score on Motor Trend, but it's at number 9, which is not terrible, but it's not great. And so I don't know about you, man. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of as I mentioned earlier there with the CX-3, I think that it was one of the best, or no, the Trailblazer, that was one of the best style vehicles in this segment. I think if the front end wasn't so bad on this, that
Yep.
this would actually be the best, if not one of the best, at
Mm-hmm.
least styled vehicles in the segment. I still think it's actually in like at least the top 5, and I hate the front end.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, I'm not a big fan of the split light design thing. It was my problem with the Cherokee back in the day too. It's my problem with the Kona. I think the Kona wears it better than this car does,
The
though.
Kona definitely
Um,
does. Yep.
so I think for that reason, I'm more inclined to give the styling to kind of hit it for styling, if anything. I will say though, the interior is pretty. I've been in these. The interior is pretty nice. I haven't driven one, but at a glance, the interior to me did not feel really any cheaper than the Kona's interior, which already felt pretty expensive for its price point, and this is even more inexpensive than that. So it comes in to me like usual with Hyundai at a very good value proposition. Like these things are
Yep.
incredibly cheap. The square shape gives them a lot of interior space.
It does.
And they have a lot of usability to them. The interior looks kind of nice. The materials, while not super high quality at this price point, I find no one in the segment's very high quality. So the only ones you're going to get nicer materials is if you get like a Trailhawk Jeep, or if you get a
Mm-hmm.
Trailblazer with every feature option. And again, at this point, you're talking $40,000 cars, and you can just buy a low trim level. You can buy a used Genesis at that point and have a better
Yeah.
interior. So like you're starting to get into other segments and stuff like that at that threshold. So from a value proposition, I think these really knock it out of the park. As I
They
talked about
do.
earlier in the episode, though, my biggest hit that I have to give this is it's front wheel drive only. And I'm not a
Hmm.
fan of crossovers that claim to be, an SUV, but don't even offer all wheel drive. So
Yeah, I agree with you on that for sure.
yeah, it
Definitely.
inherently biases me a little bit against this car. I still think it's, from what we talked about so far, one of the best. Um, However, that is probably the biggest hit I would have to give it. Is I wish they offered all-wheel drive in vehicles like this, because really, to
Mm-hmm.
me, when you're down to front only, you're buying it for the ride height essentially, right, in your driving position, because you can just get an Elantra and have probably,
Bless
excuse
you.
me, the same amount of ground clearance and things like that, and you're probably not gaining much in kind of off-road ability, right? Like no one's gonna off-road this thing. So
Right,
I don't know, I
right.
can see people are still gonna buy it, even though you could just get an Elantra hatch or something. People are gonna buy this because it's in that SUV segment, in the CUV segment, that's what people buy. But
Mm-hmm.
the lack of all-wheel is probably, if I had to critique here, my biggest issue, that and the front end styling. Other than that, I'm really just kind of nitpicking a little, and I think this is a super competitive vehicle.
It is a super competitive vehicle, and for that, I think it should score high-ish on the list. Maybe not as high as the HRV, maybe a little, maybe below. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's right up there. It's definitely top three. I think it dethrones the Compass easily. I think it bests the CX3 as
It
well.
does, yeah. I
Um,
think it could be number two
I
territory.
I think I think an argument could even be made with the HRV. It's really that hit of not having all-wheel drive that
That's
bothers me here in
true.
this segment, and that's what brings the question. Because I think it's going to be a bit more modern. Although the HRV did recently do some facelifting and mild like tech updates to keep itself
They did.
competitive,
Yep.
so it's a little tricky to say. I want to lean to the Hyundai because it's got an automatic, and I'm not a fan of CVTs. So for that reason, I'm more inclined to lean to
Mm,
it over an HRV. But as I just said, I also hate the all-wheel drive factor being missing. So it makes for a tricky proposition here.
it does.
Now I think before I render a final verdict, what I'd like to do is actually just quickly look up what the price of one of these are in comparison to some of these other vehicles we've been talking about. Because it seems like it's got such a good value proposition in general that I'd like to see what its starting price is to kind of see, how does this thing really compete against, some of these other SUVs. And it looks like here $17,000 is the starting price. That is incredibly inexpensive.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Wow, we're talking a car that is 4,000 cheaper than an already cheap Ford EcoSport, 5,000
Yeah.
cheaper than a Mitsubishi RVR.
That is
There's not
insane.
many
That
cars
is,
cheaper than an RVR.
yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. I honestly did not expect it to be that
It is
much
pretty
more
cheap. And
inexpensive.
that's why I've noticed that there's a fair amount of them on the road. Like I've seen a fair amount of venues.
Yeah, and they haven't been out very long either.
No.
The Kona's been out far longer. Wow, and the HRV start at 25. So that's a substantial almost
Yeah.
10,000. Wow, honestly, I might have just sold myself into putting this number one. I did not
Yeah.
know it was such an inexpensive vehicle. That is cheaper. That's 2,000 less than the starting price of a Mazda 3, I believe. That is cheaper than a Jetta.
Wow.
That is a
Okay.
very inexpensive vehicle. That's only a few thousand more than, a Fit.
Wait, what was the number again?
So 17,000.
17,000. Okay. So it's not cheaper than a Lancer, but like a base Lancer, but it's
Yeah, there's definitely got to be some cars that are still in the more
yeah.
inexpensive tiers. I imagine even in Elantra would probably be still a little bit on the cheaper side, but
Yeah, you're probably right on that one.
um, but yeah, that's a
That's a pretty good price there.
pretty
So
good price point.
maybe it should go up at number one because the Honda is a little pricey for that sort of range. And
Yeah,
if you're
it is a
looking
better
for,
car, but you are paying the price to get that better
you are
car for
paying the
sure.
price for that for sure. So let's put up that list and put it up
Yeah,
at
I think
number one.
number one for the Hyundai
Good
Venues
old
doing
Hyundai
pretty
Venue.
well for itself. And I don't even necessarily think that's the best compact crossover. So I think that
I
it's
know.
going to be a bit of a Hyundai dominated list at the top. Maybe we'll see. But
Maybe. My goodness. And so I think it is your turn to pick a vehicle from the
already,
list.
well, since we are already in the theme of Hyundai here, let's keep
Ooh.
it going and maybe throw another one
Is it
into the inevitable top of the list and discuss the Hyundai Kona.
Ooh, I have some thoughts on that one. I like the Hyundai Kona.
I am a big fan of the Kona as well myself, actually.
I love the
Um,
design for sure. But go ahead. Yeah, I want to hear your thoughts.
yeah, as we were both just saying earlier, and I think both agreed on the front end styling, it wears better than the Venue, even while doing the same kind of awkward split light thing. It has, I think, a more overall sharp look. It's just a bit more, I think, kind of trying to be more, I guess having the extra size just allows it to style itself a little more aggressively, but I just think in general it wears its look a bit better, even though
It
it looks very
definitely
similar to the
does.
Venue. Um, the starting price isn't substantially higher, but you do get a noticeably better, I think, higher quality vehicle than the Venue, just in having all-wheel drive, having a few more interior features. I think the big thing with this car that I really respect is that you can get the turbo engine in it, the 1.6. This is really
Perfect.
one of the
Yep.
only compact crossovers you can get with a decent engine in it. Something that makes more than, my big problem with a lot of these cars is, the HRV is 140 horsepower. The RVRs are 120 or something along those lines, 150. The Crosstreks are 150. Everything in this segment, Trailblazer is 120. It's all between like 110 to 150 horsepower. And these 1.6Ts I think are something like the 160 horse and 180 pound-feet range, which for a little crossover like this is a decent number. They come with you can get a DCT transmission in these, I think, which is pretty cool. The interiors are pretty nice in them. Overall, I think it's just a very, very good vehicle. Interior
Yeah.
packaging is pretty good. And I must say, dynamically, I actually had a fair bit of fun when I used to drive these Enterprise. I thought that their turn-in was really good. The steering feedback was really good. Suspension tuning was good. Transmission programming was good. Wasn't a CVT, which I loved. Interior space was still pretty competitive. It's not Honda packaging, but it's not super far off. It's not a big hit the way that like a Mazda is. Yeah, pictures like of these theoretical end lines where they paint match the panels and stuff, I think they look actually kind of sharp.
Yeah, that does look
Gives it,
really good. Wow.
a bit of a performance look.
I like that.
I think that overall these are a really good SUV.
Yeah,
You get
they're
an
they're
electric
solid.
one.
Yeah, you get the all electric one. You know what? They're really solid vehicles. I would recommend these to people who are looking for something that's cheapish. Now, I don't know the price off by heart though.
Yeah, here's I guess a theoretical Kona N, and that interior is like so much nicer than anything else we've
Oh
looked at.
yeah.
And
Wow.
of course these are, and that's a Kona electric there. So these are the higher end side of interiors. But yeah, I've seen an even base Konas, the interiors are not cheap really per se. Yeah, there's a regular Kona interior.
That's
It's like a
nice.
pretty nice, a well-equipped interior. It's still got definitely the cheaper materials. It's plastic door handles, plastic
Yeah, yeah.
armrests, things like that. So it's not a nice, like well-appointed interior. So you're still getting an economy vehicle for sure, but it stays class competitive pretty aggressively, I think, with other vehicles in its segment as far as interior build quality and things like that.
And so for that, do we want to put it either right underneath the vehicle, the venue, or do we want to put it on top?
I actually would be inclined to putting it on top, as the starting price is only 21,000, which substantially more than the venue. But I think for being a larger vehicle as well, offering all-wheel drive and competing with things like the HRV for thousands less,
Yeah.
I think it's actually probably one of the best vehicles still in its segment to this day.
I got to agree with you on that, man. Like, it's close enough to being, and I can't believe I'm bringing up hatchbacks, but it's close enough to being like a hatchback, like a hot hatch. Like,
Mhm.
I think you could have fun in this thing. And if you were, I don't know, a father balling on a budget, I think you probably could have fun with something like that. Honestly, go for it, man. Like, that seems like fun. I would have one myself.
Yeah, I completely agree. So with that, I think we can pretty smoothly agree that Hyundai is starting to take the top of the list here with
It
number one
definitely
and number
is.
two. Doing pretty well here. It's the H's, the Hyundai, and Honda.
Hyundai, Hyundai,
That's
and
all.
Honda.
That's all that's taking the top.
That is
And
perfect.
no wonder, and Jeremy, taking a look at our timestamps for this week and taking a look at the remainder of some of the modern vehicles on the list. If we want to maybe
Split this one in
tell
half.
people to stay tuned and yeah, wait for next week while we cover the next 10, because there should be folks about for those listening 18-ish vehicles in this segment from what we were looking at. What we were kind of deciding is officially what we consider the size of subcompact. I guess it's a bit of a,
Yes.
I guess we didn't even really bring it up, but the size of subcompact in itself is already a discussion with people, because there's the weird, you can already see it in this list. You got the Kona and the Venue, two vehicles from the same company, slightly different sizes. But I think that really anything under the size of that Tucson, vehicle or
Mm.
so, it kind of gets to squeeze into this segment. So yeah, I don't know, Jeremy. What do you think? Maybe let the
Yeah,
folks
let's
land on some suspense for this week.
we'll
We
land
have
on some.
some.
Yeah.
There's some crappy cars we haven't talked about, and there's some good cars we still haven't talked
Oh, for
about. So I
sure
think the
there.
list will shake up quite a bit still when we continue to fill it out here.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in. Look out for the next episode where we talk more about these vehicles and rank them as we go along. We may not be as reputable as the Doug score, but hey, we're having fun here, and I think that's all that really matters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and anyone that continues to watch these episodes, while we continue to publish on YouTube and work to get them to other sources, feel free to leave comments in previous videos. Again, this is a two-parter. So, do you guys own any cars on this list? Have you been shopping in this list? Leave your comments, your input. Maybe you're a tech for one of these companies at a dealership and you have more experience firsthand with reliability. Am I speaking out my ass? Do the Mazda CX-3s blow up all the time? Am I just wrong? I don't know. Let me
We
know.
don't know.
Is the Kona like a piece of garbage actually? And we just don't know that they fall apart after 50,000 kilometers, but you do from some testing thing. Let us know in the comments below any input people have on these kinds of cars. We're all here to learn, just mess around, have some fun with all the different
Exactly.
vehicles. So yeah, anyone else's input, anyone that works at Ford and got yelled at for calling it an eco sport, let us know.
Oh, I love that. Oh my goodness.
Good old Echo Sport.
Oh, good old Echo Sport. I mean, it's
One car
bad.
I'm not sad I don't drive anymore, but
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Stay tuned for part 2. And on behalf of Ben and I, thank you so much for watching. Take care. Like, share, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. And we'll see you next time.
yeah, thank you very much for watching us, guys. You can follow us on all social medias at Gears and Grades. And that's kind of our main place. Stay tuned for as we upload more clips from the show, more episodes, and continue to follow the shenanigans between Jeremy and I, and as we attempt to grow this more and more into like a legit looking thing.
We look
Yeah.
forward to it. We love
Thank you
this.
very much for joining us, everybody. Thanks again, Jeremy.
Thanks, Ben. And we'll see you around, guys. Okay? Take care.
Have a good night, guys. Take care.